The Alien franchise is back with a new entry by director Fede Álvarez, and as always, the horror of the xenomorph is only outmatched by the evil of Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Let's see if Alien Romulus is the return to form that many fans were hoping for. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is not Walter, David.
I come in peace. Is anybody even going to know that? Did anybody go back and actually watch a review of Alien Covenant?
Well, no, but they might at least get the reference just if they've seen Covenant.
That's fair.
Yeah. But yes, welcome to the show. It's a sci-fi movie podcast. We get together, we talk about sci-fi movie, and it's a big week, it's a big episode because we have a new theatrical release, and that is Alien Romulus. Of course, all the previous movies in the franchise have been reviewed before on the channel. The original 4 with myself and Tara, as were AVP 1 and 2, and then Prometheus and Alien Covenant here with David. Those are in the David era, if we're calling spans of the show eras. So
it's like when after the show jumps the shark and they have to introduce some new characters.
Yes, you're pitching. Yes, I agree.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, big deal. Little known fact about me: Aliens is maybe just my favorite movie of all time, and I'm very invested. And I have went on many rants about how every Alien movie released in my adult life has been a complete disappointment in some fashion or another.
What? No.
You could check out those prior 2 reviews and the AVP reviews for that matter for more context. I was going
to say, how long was the Prometheus review? I remember it not being a short one.
Oh yeah, it was like 2.5 hours. Oh yeah, I want to say. So yeah, a lot got into this, but there was some hope as well because, well, I don't want to hope because I've been hurt too many times, but I keep going back to the abusive film company anyway.
Yes, Mr. Scott, do what you must with me.
But Fede Álvarez is directing this, and I loved Evil Dead 2013. I actually think it's my favorite Evil Dead movie. So he has worked magic before. And Don't Breathe was a fun movie. I don't think it was as good as these Evil Dead, but it was a solid movie. So I went into this with a lot of hope that it would be something that I would be happy with. It's something that I would, I wasn't expecting anything touching the first 2 movies. That's just asking for the impossible, practically, right? That's a lightning in a bottle. The idea that this franchise could have a 3rd movie of that caliber is downright absurd. If it ever happens, then yeah, I'll sing from the rooftops in the mountains. I'll go hiking and do all sorts of weird exercise to celebrate. But that's not what I was expecting going into this.
Right.
So that's okay. So I mean, how are your hopes or fears or feelings going into this, David?
I mean, I purposely tried to stay as distant as possible from this. I tried to avoid all the trailers dropping. I think I saw the very first teaser for it, and it's weird because obviously from the get-go, the first Alien movie, it is a horror movie. It is supposed to be a terrifying time, and I'll just be fully self-admitting here. I am a scaredy little baby, and I think I've seen maybe 2 horror movies actually in theaters, like in my lifetime. Not to say, there's not tense movies. There's not movies with like tension or jump scares or whatever, but actual out and out horror movies. Not a fan. Not great with that. So having to sit in this theater knowing that it was going to be a horror movie the whole time, because that's about all I got from that teaser trailer, I was a bit scared, I guess you would say. But in terms of like quality and stuff like that, I mean, as much as I try to avoid spoilers and whatnot, I did basically see this the day it came out. I saw this on opening day, so I didn't have a lot of time to get spoiled. But from the very brief stuff I was hearing online, it was all positive. So I was, at least as I entered the theater, like, okay, all right, we might be able to undo the Prometheus Alien Covenant stuff here and get back to a point where Alien is a name that's worth checking out.
Actually, I got a trailer for Smile 2, which I hadn't seen, and I'm only bringing it up because, well, I didn't like the first one particularly, but I felt a little sad because there was like a set of parents and their kid. Now, this was a 15 in the UK, which is, it's exactly what it sounds like. You have to be 15 to get in. There's no It's none of this, you can go with a parent kind of thing. So this girl had to be at least 15, 16. She was about that age with her parents. And I heard her get really excited when she realized it was Smile 2. And I felt a deep chill in my soul for the future of humanity, that these alphas out there are into Smile because it's not very good. But that's a rant for Streams After Midnight. Go check out that.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's always an entire generation that likes the trash that's coming out at any point.
Yes. So yeah, just before we get started, I should give the old speech here. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers. I feel that's especially important to mention when it's a big new theater release. We're going to give you some impressions and general vibes first, and then we'll warn you before we get to spoilers. If you are enjoying the show and you're on YouTube, please do hit the like button. Helps us out a bunch if you do, and you can get bonus shows over on our Patreon. But I'll tell you that, or more about that, at the end of the episode. So that is yes. So to get into general thoughts and feelings, then hope's a dangerous thing. I've been quoting this line from Shawshank all week, just leading up to this. I saw the Rotten Tomatoes score, which was pretty respectable, and went, oh, hope's a dangerous thing. It can drive a man insane. I don't know about this. Don't give me hope. Don't you dare.
I watched through the Comics from the Multiverse episode. You were talking to Matt about the absolute garbage you had to watch this week.
Oh, it's been a rough week.
And how all of your hopes were hanging on Romulus to just bring it back.
Oh, it's been a long week of recording for various shows. Now, I normally start by asking you, but I'm so invested in this, I'm just going to...
Please, yes, I'd love to hear it.
Jump in and give some feelings and thoughts here. Okay, how do I approach this? How do I say?
Every word that comes out of your mouth that's not the opinion is just building this like excitement and tension in my stomach.
Right. So the thing I was saying in the last couple of weeks, I get into this, but my attitude is that obviously I'm hoping for a good movie. Obviously I'm hoping it's going to be great. But I kind of had this realistic expectation that because it's Fede Álvarez, I expect it to be pretty at least decent, but it could be at the low end, maybe an overly safe movie that is like relies too much on like references, nostalgia, your typical, your Ghostbusters Afterlife style of movie. Right. But ideally it'll transcend that and be something better, something else, and it is possible that it could be that. As this movie went on, it kept dipping and dipping, and I was very positive about a lot of things early on, but it kept, it did something, I was like, oh, I don't like that, but it's fine, I still like everything else, that's alright. 5 minutes, 10 minutes go past, oh, I don't like that either, oh that's fine, stay positive, and by the time the credits rolled, there was so many things that had tallied up over the course of the runtime that I came out feeling like it not only was at the low end of my prediction, that it was probably even a little bit under it. Like it's not a complete train wreck. It's not trash like Covenant is. Come at me, internet, right? It's not that, but it is filled with forced fan service references, some of which made me cringe to the high heavens. I never quite really completely got on board with the characters, so I think the script is the main culprit. I think like there's one character that I think is quite interesting. I think the rest never quite live up to being anything else. But to be on the positive side, I do think the production value is fantastic. I think it's directed well. I think everything looks great. The sets, there's practical sets, there's practical aliens as much as they could. All that stuff looks great. I love some of the shots in space. I thought the general premise that it set up in the opening act, I also really liked. It was coming from kind of a different perspective, but very much in the alien world. Liked all that. But sadly, by the time it got to the end credits, I was like, God damn it. Like, too many choices. And some of them I really want to talk about. They're all complete spoilers, though.
Yes.
So I will not be saying a single goddamn thing. But I will just emphasize once again, not only did this dip its toes into we're going to do some cheeky little references to like call back to the first two movies, it goes so deep into doing that. Some of them obvious, some of them a bit more subtle, that by the time you get to the last few, I was just groaning and my eyes were rolling. And even one of the things they kind of redid from another movie felt like you took from this one? Okay, that's a bold choice. I know what you're talking
about, yeah.
That's a bold choice, but yeah, so there's things in it I like. I think there's individual little set pieces, and sadly, there's actually some great new little ideas of like, oh, let's do a set piece with this aspect of the alien that they've never really done in a movie before. We're going to explore how this thing works a little bit differently, or use that to fuel a set piece where they have to establish some rules, and they're going to go do a thing, and like, I think there's some fun little ideas in here that feel like good ideas. I just wish it was wrapped up in a movie with better characters. And honestly, I wish it felt like it had something to say. I wish there was some subtext here, and it's something that just feels lacking. It feels like a movie that's a hodgepodge of all the things you like from Alien and Aliens, and maybe even a sprinkling of some of the other ones, and that's all it's about. It never feels like it actually is about something. Early on, I was sort of paying attention and looking for little things that might hint at like its key themes. And there was one or two things I thought, oh, I can see how that's going to lead to like more of an idea as it goes on. And then they just never really did anything with that. Like I say, it's well directed and it looks great. It looks like a real movie. It does not look like some, everything's on a green screen like some recent Marvel movies have done. It looks like a real movie. The production value is off the charts, and it's a medium budget. It's $80 million, which is pretty medium to low these days, to be honest, for a big movie like this. And it looks fantastic. So there's positives to be had, but unfortunately, it's not it just, like, I tried to stay positive, and it just kept chipping away that by the end, I'm like, I think I'm under I want to, like, be positive about this now. I'm disappointed, and it's not that great. And arguably, it's not even that good either.
I get what you're saying. I think I'm a little bit more positive than you. In terms of everything you're saying, I fully agree with. I think that the biggest problem I had, besides the choices that were made for the third act, which obviously we will get to, the biggest problem I had was that theming thing, where it felt like the beginning was setting up a lot of bigger ideas, especially involving Weyland-Yutani as like an entity. They kept on setting up like, oh, we could cover this as a theme, this is a theme, this is a theme. But by the time you get to like the halfway point, they're not themes. Like, they're not things that we're focusing on. It's not things that we're going to be continuing forward with. And even things that they set up later on that you think are going to come back as themes, it really just don't feel like they're there. All in all, by the time you get to the end of this movie, I'm not sure what it was really trying to say at all, if anything. It just kind of feels, like you said, it feels like it's trying to take everything that people remember and love about Alien and Aliens and just kind of repackage it into a new Ghostbusters Afterlife sort of thing, where it's like, look, those things happened, we're not discounting them, but we're also going to be doing a lot of those things here in a slightly newer and more bombastic way, because they do set up the rules. I don't think there's any part in this movie where they just suddenly pull something out of their ass and just like, and now the aliens can talk now or something like that. Like, no, they've always followed a very set structure of rules, and I think they do a good job of set up and payoff in this movie. But ultimately, it is a lot of stuff that, as I was watching it, I was thinking, oh, this is that bit from Aliens, or oh, this is that bit from Alien. Like, this is just redoing that in a slightly different way, in a slightly different setting, but it's still more or less the same exact things happening. Again, the third act goes completely off the wall for me, but we will get to that when we get to it.
Which is actually kind of a tradition for some of the Alien sequels at this point.
True, very true.
So, I mean, it's living up. Like, even if it wasn't going to be some, like, A+ movie that had like something meaningful to say, I would be down for just a romp using the aliens and whatnot, but I think there's just enough creative decisions with the story and like where it goes that it kept like pulling me out of it. It kept taking me away from just like, I can enjoy just, oh, it's a bunch of characters, they're trapped in a structure with an alien, and we're going to maybe have some new interesting set pieces of how to like get around them or fight them or whatever. But other than that, it's just a fun romp and that's all. I think I'd be on board with that, and I could even like elevate that to almost great territory if it was done really well, without even having anything meaningful to say. But sadly, like, it's like you can see potential in there. You see the building blocks of things, and then for whatever reason, the choices that were made, and we're left with this really mixed bag. I'm actually surprised it's got such a high Rotten Tomatoes score, to be honest. Because I've been seeing some people say, oh, this is the easily the best one since Aliens, which I mean, technically might be true if I think about it.
Yeah,
but,
I was gonna say it's like comparing it to the lowest of the low here. I don't think it's that.
Well, yeah,
big
but
of
that's the point. No, that's not the sentiment they're saying it in. No, they're saying it in. No, this is almost on par. This is something that's up to the standard again, kind of thing. Like there's that sentiment's been thrown around. I'm seeing 4 out of 5s, 5 out of 5s from various review circles and whatnot coming out, and I just don't like. I don't get it being rated that high. I just don't see how you could have passion for this. It feels so empty in terms of like actual fire, new ideas.
I'm wondering if this is the same sort of scenario as Force Awakens, where the fan base was in such a drought for good content for so long that they're just like, we got one that's halfway decent, guys. Ring the alarm. We did it. We got there.
Yeah, because there's some stuff at the end as well where I feel like it's like, oh, this is just this bit. This is just. It started to annoy me more as it went on, because it's fine having a couple of similar moments where you feel like, okay, they've got this general idea because it's going to make us all think of this moment from a previous thing, but there's just one-to-one moments at a certain point where it's like, okay, like you're basically just remaking scenes now from certain things.
Yeah, I do think it's weird though, because I couldn't tell you specifically what I would want to see, but it feels like Alien as a concept, as like the universe that has been set up, not even ignoring the Prometheus and Alien Covenant stuff, just what we got from Alien and Aliens. I feel like there is so much potential there that is, even with like Alien 3 or Resurrection, was still left untapped. It was still left on.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's weird to me that this did choose to just pull so much from the first two.
I think what's sad about it is that I think the opening act of this movie feels like it is like expanding on stuff. It's saying, hey, here's like the working class working on one of these colony moons that we know Weyland-Yutani do, and like this is their life. This is not a team of scientists or the colonial marines going out to investigate something. This is a bunch of regular young people who are, they've got their reasons for doing what they're about to do, but it just sets them up in a different way, and it's very different to any group of characters we've had up until that. I like the concept. I like what the premise was to start things off with. But yeah, just there's just lots of weird decisions for the story that I just don't like, and the more they added up as the movie went on, by the time I got to the end, like there was almost a sinking feeling. Because it was like, yeah, okay, a little blip here or there I didn't like, but I'm trying to stay positive and I'm liking the gist of it. But there's definitely a certain point about 2/3 in where there's a kind of a I don't even call it a hump. There's like there's a moment where I'm like, this is where it turned, and there was almost no going back. And yeah, it's actually almost punctuated by a certain line of dialogue, actually.
I wonder if it's the same scene that I'm thinking about, but like there is a scene in this movie, no spoilers, there's a scene in this movie that when we get to it in the recap, my only thoughts were to you. I was smiling and grinning like an idiot the entire time, because all I could think is, oh, Pete's gonna hate this.
Yep, you're probably right. So just to do some of the other things we do in spoiler free, we usually run through the cast and talk about them a little bit. Cailee Spaeny is our lead. She's Rain, who I recognize from Pacific Rim Uprising, although she was also in something else recently. But she's an upcoming actress. She's the lead role in this. We have David Jonsson, who I also don't know. These are all kind of up and comers.
Yeah, I mean, I much prefer having a cast of unknowns, especially in like horror movie sort of settings.
Did you not recognize Isabela Merced?
Let me check. She looked somewhat familiar. Where did I see her? God, now I'm scared. Here's the thing. I see her listed as Transformers Last Night, but I never saw that movie, so I'm curious.
Just look at our list and go third from the top.
Third from the top, okay.
Very recent.
Oh no. Oh no. So now I didn't recognize her at all for that.
Yeah, David's having flashbacks to Madam Web, because that's what she was in earlier this year.
If you haven't seen that review on Patreon, be sure to check it out, because it is a fever dream.
Yeah, it just came out this past few days. So not like a bunch of notable, which I don't mind. Yeah, I think a cast of unknowns for an Alien movie actually makes a lot of sense to me. It kind of works. I think the problem partly, though, with the characters is that I think the main two, like, they at least try and give them a lot of development. We'll sort of talk about in the spoilers about how successful some of that is. But I think the rest of the group of characters do suffer from being very bland, and they try and have this kind of asshole character who is clearly, it's kind of a callback to Bill Paxton in Aliens, being kind of like in over his head and being a bit cocky. Right. And all I could think was, yeah, but you had Bill Paxton doing it, so he was likable even when he was being an asshole. Whereas the guy in this, I hated, and I just wanted to see him get killed as quickly as humanly possible.
See, that's the balance here. It's the I forget the exact term. I think it's like the economy of character writing or something like that, where it's obviously you don't want to forecast too hard which characters are going to make it and which characters are going to die, but ultimately the characters that get spent longer in the movie are going to get more development. So it's hard to really mask that of like, okay, we have a character that we dislike and we are hoping that they're going to die. Do they die fast enough there? And then other characters like we have Eileen Wu as Navarro.
Yes.
You could have asked me as I was watching the movie what her name was. I couldn't have told you.
I mean, I couldn't have told you. I couldn't have told you the asshole's character was Bjorn.
Yeah.
I could never have told you that because he's got a thick English accent, so I was not expecting Bjorn.
Yeah, a lot of them do for some reason, and I like, is this part of the lore that like all of Britain and Scotland just got evacuated to this colony planet? I don't understand why this planet has this accent.
I don't hear any Scottish accents.
I was just taking the whole of the UK.
Okay. Yeah,
Welsh.
I thought he specifically mentioned Scotland as if you heard a character. I don't remember any Scottish accents. Yeah.
Well,
a couple of them are American, but yeah, like a lot of the rest, like the side cast, are, well, it's kind of an even mix between English and American, actually, now I'm thinking about it. So
I don't know, just found it because like at no point I think throughout any of the other movies, even going back to Prometheus and stuff, was there any character whose accent was so pronounced. Like everyone just kind of had this vague American, or, you know, like there was I feel like his name is William Hurt, but I'm not positive about that.
You're thinking of John Hurt.
John Hurt, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, obviously he was British, but beyond that, everyone else is just straight American, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's anything specific. I mean, honestly, the thick accent did almost like take me out of it a little bit, because as soon as I heard it, I'm like, you don't belong in the Alien universe.
Right.
You sound like you're from...
Get over there to your Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a strange little detail. Music's kind of interesting, because they do mix in a lot of themes from various other Alien movies kind of throughout, depending on what's going on, so... You know, we'll maybe bring that up a little bit in spoilers as well as they become relevant. But, yeah.
I would say special effects. I can't spoil it because it is specifically a massive spoiler.
Well, I think where you're going with this is, generally speaking, they're absolutely excellent, but there's one huge exception.
Yes, absolutely. There's one effect that gets brought up about halfway to the movie, and as soon as it starts, and it's a constant recurring thing, it's noticeable. And it's something that distracts heavily.
It's very bad. And it's such a shame, because like there's so much effort went into having practical aliens and effects as much as they could, and sets and all that sort of stuff, that this very CG thing is just such an eyesore. And yeah, for the record, that was probably the first huge red flag for me, was that moment. Not because the CG was bad necessarily, although that's part of it, but just what that was in general. But
yeah.
All right, I think we should get to spoilers. I think there's a lot to go through.
All right. Well, if we're getting into spoilers, there is just one more thing I want to say at the top of spoilers that does, like, it's not a massive spoiler. It's such a tiny itty bitty one, but I don't want to say it outside the spoiler section. All
right, okay. But so we're giving spoiler warning though, right? So we're in spoilers now. All right. So what's your kind of spoiler you wanted to save till this?
The only thing is, one thing that I really appreciate about this movie is I think this is the first movie in the franchise that really takes full advantage of facehuggers and how terrifying they are, independent of the xenomorph itself.
Sure.
I think that all the other ones, you know, there's one facehugger, two facehuggers, they put them on, and then they just disappear for the rest of the movie. This is the first one where I feel like they realized, no, that thing within itself is terrifying. Let's let that continue to be a threat.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's fun that they try and do some new things with them. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll get into that. Yeah. So actually, this isn't even a spoiler. I mentioned this before, but this is not about the movie so much as my theater.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I went into the room. It was just about to hit the trailers as I walked in, and I noticed it looked a bit dim. Right, dimmer than normal, and I thought, oh, that's weird. Right. So my assumption is that the projector, just the bulb is going and it needs a new bulb, and it's just a bit dimmer than it should be. But of course, it's an Alien movie, so once the Alien movie started, I'm like, oh, this is going to be dull the whole time, and it looks quite dark. It was a dark movie because it's a horror movie, and I'm like, shit, this is annoying. And yeah, it was annoying. There was definitely times where like it was almost feeling like I was hurting my eyes, just sort of like trying to keep focused on it because it was so dull. Yeah, so. There's just, I don't think that affects like anything I'm about to say about the movie. I just wanted to point out that it was frustrating. And it's the first time I think it's ever happened to me where I've went in, because the trailer for Kraven the Hunter was playing, and I'm like, this looks kind of dull. Is that just this movie?
No, Kraven the Hunter is a very dull movie.
I don't know. Could be so bad it's hilarious.
Yeah. God, I'm not looking forward to that popping up on the list of extra reels. That being said, obviously, recently we ditched Borderlands from the Ace schedule. I didn't get a trailer for it because it's fully out by now. But I did get one of those like before the trailer things, and they're like, check out what each of the characters and their video game counterpart. And I'm like, wow, if you have to explain to me the video game counterparts, I'm glad I didn't see this movie.
Yep. Yes. But I look forward to that on Patreon early next year. So. Yeah, right. So the movie, you got the Fox. Well, it's not Fox anymore, but I still call it the Fox logo. Right?
The 20th Century Studios.
Yeah, that's a mouthful, though. It says Fox. It's the Fox logo, right? And you get the scot-free, and then it goes into, basically, like this was actually the reason why I brought up the darkness thing, right? And it being like a bit dimmer than it should be, is that it made this opening scene quite rough to watch because it's super dark intentionally, and effectively what it is a probe ship exploring the wreckage of the Nostromo, right? So I'm like, okay, right, I see what we're doing here, right? This is something different, but it makes it clear it's the Nostromo, and it basically extracts like a hunk of debris or a hunk of asteroid, whatever it is.
Yeah, like space rock or something, it looks like.
And like the xenomorph is sort of like almost fossilized in the rock from this destruction. And we see, them kind of laser the rock open, and the final shot before the title, cuts to the black and you get the title, is seeing the xenomorph. Although in my dim theater, I could just barely make out the head at the last second and no more. But and it could also an alien Romulus. Right? I was like, okay, interesting opening. They're tying it straight to the first movie. I do question like the survivability of the xenomorph after the events of Alien, but fine. If that's what we're going with, I'll accept it as the intro. Whatever.
I was trying to remember exactly how that happened. Wasn't it that she was on the escape pod and she like blasted it with the jets and it just kind of like went off into deep space?
Yes, that's what it looked like at the end. Yeah.
Which is weird to me then that they were around the Nostromo records, because she flew away for quite some time after that before she even fought the alien. Is it possible they're saying that there was like a second alien on the ship somehow or something?
I don't think so.
All right.
I think it was just meant to be close enough. Maybe she kicked it back towards the Nostromo debris or something. It's a little contrived, right? There's a few things in this movie that actually are a little contrived, and this is absolutely one of them. But I definitely got a little pang of, maybe they're going to lay this nostalgia on thick, because during this opening, they do the thing where all the computers in the probe ship turn on as it approaches the wreckage, and it's very much just the opening of Alien with all the stuff turning on.
I should have mentioned this in the pre-spoiler section, but I adore the fact that they used accurate tech to make it seem like we're still in the Alien timeline.
Oh, yes,
and it isn't some like crazy ass Prometheus style future tech where it's all like modern updated holograms and stuff like that. This is IBM 80s monitors. It's so good looking the whole way through to have this.
No, I do. I love that production value and the choice to have all that. I'm just kind of critiquing a little bit the choice to just mimic the start of Alien almost like exactly in some ways. But, regardless, like I said, it's a fine little intro. It gets you kind of in the mood, the vibe, and they're setting things up. And when I said like they pull from stuff from Alien and Aliens, like, because once we go to the colony and we get introduced to our main character, Rain, we get like she's dreaming about the sun because she's never seen the sun before because she's grown up in this shitty moon that never sees the sun. And her parents have died from mining accidents, and she's like conscripted to keep working here. And we'll get into all that. But when we see her go outside, I did get quite excited to actually see, oh, I recognize the big reactor building from Aliens. This is clearly the same type of design, but this is a fully functioning base with like thousands of people here. And like she's walking through basically a street crowd going to like, see this person at a window about her employment. And like, it really sets up a vibe. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting seeing a functioning part of this universe. It's kind of like why I think a lot of Alien fans have always said the natural thing to do after Aliens was to like just go to Earth and do something on Earth in the future. But but still, this was interesting enough, and it felt like, okay, we're milking the nostalgia for both Alien and Aliens by having the sounds and the computers from Alien, but we've got this location that's a lot more reminiscent of Aliens. But still, like thus far, I don't think it did anything egregious because I'm like, okay, this is an interesting setting, and like I said before, everything it sets up with this idea that she's trapped here, right? She thought she was done with her years working here, but they said, oh no, things are rough. We're doubling everyone's work years.
This is exactly where like I thought the theming was going. Obviously they showed this. It's a planet. It's an entire planet that is owned by this mega corporation. And all the main girl wants is like she followed the rules. She did everything right, and she says, "Hey, I filled my quota. I got everything done. Rules say that I can get papers to get off the planet. Like I did my thing." And the lady behind the desk just like you see on her screen, just like click a button and the quota just doubles. And she's like, "Nope, sorry, you got to stay here for another 5 to 7 years. Have a nice day." It's like, God, I feel that in my bones. Please continue that theme.
And not only that, like she mentions that she doesn't have parents because they both died from poisoning in the mines because this is a mining moon. And the woman then says, also, you're being transferred to the mines, meaning that her fate is probably just going to be the same as her parents.
Yeah, she's the type of trouble that's trying to get off the planet. Can't have that. So we're just going to put her in the dangerous parts.
So it's like, okay, we're setting up a simple idea. And, I'll get into Andy in a second. But basically, she gets called up, who I presume is her ex-boyfriend, Tyler, to come and meet him and his little crew. And they've got this plan. The premise of this movie is that they have basically become aware that there's a floating abandoned space station that belongs to Weyland-Yutani that's floating just out of the reach of the planet, right? And because some of this crew are like the truckers that go up and down like with the ore or whatever they're mining, they like hey, we can fly up there and we're just going to not wait to do it legally. We're just going to leave and go to this magical planet that we want to go to that's got a bright sun and it's this perfect place and it's outside
of Weyland's reach. It's outside of their entire empire or whatever.
So they're trying to escape, and the only reason why they have to go up to this space station, and this is what our main girl Rain brings up, is but it takes 9 years to travel there. Like that's a long time. So the plot of this movie is they want to go up to this abandoned space station before Weyland-Yutani get to it and steal the cryopods so they can sleep on the journey. And I'm like, I actually love that premise. I think that is a simple, clear idea that's using tech already established, but it gives us characters who are approaching it as if it's like, because in all these previous Alien movies, particularly the first two, but even some of the later ones, like they always just have cryo sleep. It's always just a thing they have because they're on funded ships, they're on whatever, right? But these are poor people who have to steal them, so to them they're super valuable. The idea of getting these hypersleep pods is like something precious that they're going to try and take, and it's about getting a better life, it's about getting away from Weyland-Yutani, and it's easy to root for them even without the evidence they give in this movie, because frankly, Weyland-Yutani kind of treats people like shit throughout this entire franchise, so it's easy to get on board.
Absolutely. That's immediately pulling back from Alien with they don't care about the crew, all they care about is the safety of this creature. That's immediately pulling that back, but taking it that extra route to show even when aliens aren't involved, even when it isn't some life-changing thing, Yutani is still just an absolute prick to work for. There is no reason to have any sort of company loyalty here, because they are the worst all the time.
Yeah. And we find out a little bit later the timeline here, but I'll just bring it up now for context. This is 20 years after Alien, which is interesting because that means it's 37 years before Aliens. So
yes.
Interesting.
Smack dab in the middle, pretty much.
Yeah. Very curious. But that's fine though, because like this whole thing where the space station is obviously like a lab where they were doing stuff with aliens. That's fine because it's always been hinted at in Aliens, and even in Alien to an extent, that Weyland-Yutani knew of something. Like they knew, like we don't know how much they know about this life form, but they clearly want it. So
they knew whatever they got out of Prometheus and all that, where it's the stars and the engineers and the black goo.
It's not canon if I don't want it to be.
Yeah, I am afraid you are out of luck there, buddy.
I don't care. I don't care what else comes up in this movie.
Oh boy. But yeah, no,
piss off.
I appreciate like the introduction of the friend group here, but ultimately, like as they were coming up, they were saying their names, they were, you know, doing a little bit of their personalities here during this briefing. Ultimately, though, I never felt connected to a single one of them. I was in on our main pair of Ryan and Rain, or Andy and Rain, but I just
Ryan and Rain. That sounds good. Yeah. Ryan and Rain.
Yeah, why not? Just rewrite the movie on the fly. But no, the rest of them were just kind of for me. In fact, reading the wiki article, the recap for it now, it says that Tyler and his sister Kay, I had no idea they were siblings. I had absolutely no clue.
Oh no, I knew that. I did catch her at one point, or at one point when Rain finds out she's pregnant, she says, "Don't tell my brother." So there is a little couple of lines that tell you. Yeah,
I remember the line, but I thought we were talking about like Bjorn maybe, or I had no idea which one of them was the brother. No,
it's because when she first comes to see them, Kay's happy to see her, and it definitely feels like, oh, this is the sister of her ex-boyfriend who was friends with her too, but they've not seen each other because they split up, so it's like this reunion kind of moment.
Okay, fair enough.
But I mean, I'm not saying they were screaming it from the rooftops, but it was there. You could pick up on it, but you're right though, in that it doesn't matter that much. It never really feels like it becomes like a major deal. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I have the same problem with the rest of the characters, is that I just never felt much for most of them, Tyler included, even though he's like the love interest for the main girl. I just never felt much. They just felt like fodder by and large. And that's a problem in an Alien movie, because, again, it seems unfair to compare it to either of the first two movies, but both of them have great ensembles, and they're both great in different ways, which is so good. And the acting in both definitely elevates a lot of those characters, but like both of those movies do a good job of like giving you this eclectic cast who are all memorable and all whatever. But here, it just kind of feels like the only one that sticks out is the one who's a dickhead constantly, which is Bjorn, because he's constantly just demeaning Andy for being an android, which, you know, we're going to talk about in a minute, but he is just so thoroughly unlikable. He's the only one that sticks out, and the only real feeling I had for him is that I kind of want you to die.
Right.
So,
and it's okay to have that character. It's, you know, the douchebag character that you're just hoping you see die, but ultimately the movie still tries to play him in a part of the crew, like part of the group that you want to see the group succeed. I think that those characters are played best when they're played opposite the group and are, you know, like the corporate guy from Aliens.
I actually almost thought they were trying to do something thematically here with. So obviously we got Rain and Andy, and Rain, even when Andy is making the others either uncomfortable for whatever reason, or Andy is being victimized by them, she's always sort of standing by his side, and it's kind of their pair. And I kind of felt like there was a bit of a theme forming, because Tyler is like, yeah, Bjorn, who's his cousin, is like, yeah, I know he's a dick, but he's right about some things. Like, it's this idea that like we have people that are with us in a pair that we know aren't perfect, but we have to sort of stand by them anyway. I felt like it was maybe trying to do something like that by like maybe comparing those relationships. It's not enough. I don't think it goes in depth with it, but it's the only thing I can kind of take from it, to be honest.
I was trying the whole way through to figure out what was the significance of naming this movie Romulus. Now, obviously, the space station they go up to is the Romulus, and then the other half is the Remus. It's like a twin pairing of space stations.
Romulus, yes.
Right. But obviously, Romulus and Remus, they come from an ancient myth. They are brothers that were born.
Well, they bring this up. There's like a mural on a wall at one point in the station that they see. But and I thought, oh, they just sort of teased that there. I can't wait till they bring that up again to get more context and what it means for the movie. And then it never comes back up again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was trying to piece together, like, okay, is Romulus referring to the fact of, like, okay, we got Andy and Rain, they're a pair. We got Tyler and Bjorn, they're a pair. There's all this stuff of talking about, like, coming in pairs and, like, not being able to be separated. But, again, I don't feel like it really delivered on that. I don't feel like that was a theme that was strong enough to point it out throughout the end part of the movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I don't know much about this. I read something briefly after the movie because I was curious. Romulus and what was the other one?
Remus.
They were brothers, but Romulus ended up betraying his brother and took over Rome, I want to say?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think the indication here is because they when they go up to the station, they're in the Remus half, and everything's kind of fine except for obviously when they eventually run into the facehuggers. But the big reveal is that the other half of the ship, which makes sense given all the destruction, the other half, the Romulus half, is the one that's full of other aliens that are already around. So I think that's what they were going for there. But, you know, anyway, so to rewind a little bit and talk about Andy, because Andy's obviously a big character. I think he's probably the best character in the movie.
I'd agree.
He has the most weight to him, and we find out very quickly that he is a synth. He is an android. He is also damaged. He is broken in some way, and he kind of glitches out a little bit, but he's very loyal to Rain, and we find out as the movie goes on that her parents kind of just sort of, like, he was a Weyland-Yutani droid, but because he was broken, he was thrown in the trash, and her dad had, like, basically took him out the dumpster, fixed him up as best he could, and gave him the prime directive of doing whatever's best for her. So it's almost like they knew they were dying from being sick, and like he's like, oh, we need to like give her someone to look after her. So we're going to like fix up this synth. But she's very close with him. She cares about him a lot. And the big thing at the start where we find out he's an android is that some kids, some punks, decide to start beating him up for no reason, and she comes in to like protect him. But you see the milk blood coming from his ear.
Yep, and then she do the whole thing of like, apparently there's he is prone to what I can only call the robot equivalent of seizures, where he all of a sudden just locks up and is unable to do anything. And she has a little like reset key or something that she can do on his neck that brings him out of it, but he's unable to escape it on his own.
Yeah. And this was the other big thing that I thought, oh, this is going to be a key theme of this movie, is how everyone else does not consider him to be real. They all say he's just a synth, he's basically a toaster, we shouldn't care about him, but yet she's going to. And I thought, you know what, this is already better than all the shit with David, because this is far more interesting to me to actually deal with the real human qualities of, like, does he count his life if he cares, if he's sympathetic, if he looks out for someone, does he care, should we care about him being hurt? And she clearly does. And the others challenging that to varying degrees, I thought, oh, this is a big theme. And it kind of is the big main theme of the movie, I'd say, that it kind of sticks to. It does murky things up as it goes a little bit, but, I mean, we'll get into that. But
yeah, I mean, regardless, all of the characters in this movie, except for Andy, basically have, okay, we're going to hop into the ship, we're going to get what we need, and then we're going to take off for this other planet. And then the aliens happen, and they're just scared the whole time. There's a little bit more for Rain, but not much. Andy, however, because of the way the story moves, actually feels like his character has pathos, it has a drive, it has change over time. He is by far the most notable character in terms of like actual character, actual stuff going on behind the scenes.
Honestly, I think something that would have elevated this movie quite a bit is if Rain was just a bit stronger as a character. Because I think I think Cailee Spaeny's fine in the role, but I don't think she gets a whole lot to do other than just sort of react to what Andy's doing or being sort of feeling bad for Andy or whatever. That's all she ever really kind of is doing. And I think the other thing that maybe lacks for me as well is that I really, you know, they've got this goal, they've got this sort of like dream they want to achieve, and they're doing this, you know, slightly illegal thing, but we're kind of, I don't think we ever for a second think, oh, this is a bit bad that they're doing this. No, Weyland-Yutani are scum, right? It's fine. We're rooting for them. I do think, I wish that, and I get that once aliens are around and they're scared for their lives, that becomes the primary concern. But I do kind of wish that the sort of the feeling that they were still trying to achieve their dream the entire time was still kind of there. I feel like once the aliens show up, they don't even, it's not even a thought. It's not even something that gets brought up or is concerning. It never feels that we're still driving towards something. It just becomes we're trying to survive, and that's it. That's all that's going on.
There's a point, and I get it, but there's a point in this movie where they specifically, they're pushed between a rock and a hard place. They have a chance to get someone out, and they say, look, we're going to send you back down to the planet. You can get some medical help. We'll do all that. But like, they just inherently say, we're going back down to the planet. We're giving up. We're not going out to like achieve our dreams. This is all about just getting back to safety. And I get that from the point of it is a life or death situation. They'd rather be alive than free in that case. But you're right in that there's no pull there. There's no, like, they want to still see if they can make it work. It's just at a certain point they give up and they say, all right, we're not going to do that anymore. And there's no like hesitation or anything going on between them. It just happens.
And it's kind of weird though, because it also at times feels that the aliens aren't the primary concern of the movie either. Like it's kind of like teasing, like, oh, what's Andy going to do once he's had this change, which we'll talk about. But because it kind of like focuses a bit more in that, but maybe not enough to complete. Like, I almost feel like either you have to teach me that the characters are only concerned with the aliens and they're a constant threat and something they constantly think about. But this movie, and this is maybe something I should have said in the spoiler-free section actually, is that it kind of puts itself in a lot of writing corners. And this is again me criticizing the script, because I think the script is the bad part of this movie. I love the direction, the set design, the effects, all that stuff. But the script constantly puts itself into situations where the characters are just fine standing around talking, and then eventually they'll hear a roar of an alien, and it's like, oh, I guess we're now in danger, we have to move. And I'm like, they should feel in danger every second they're not, unless they're in like a safe room like an aliens where they've welded up doors and they're like, okay, we've completely protected ourselves in here so we've got a moment to breathe. They should feel that they're constantly in danger. And it just felt like at times it was just going into those cliches where either the aliens showing up was choreographed so they could get away easily, or there's weird times where the aliens just decide to not immediately kill people when they would otherwise with other characters, and it just feels like weird plot armor moments. So
yeah, they do try to do an explanation there, and obviously this has been something ever since Aliens, where it's, they take certain characters and put them like cocooned up on the walls rather than killing them, and the inherent thing that they say is those are the ones that are to be used for gestation. They're the ones that are to be used to make more aliens.
Which is fine, but there's definitely moments in here where it feels like they're just about to kill them anyway. They're taking an extra 10 seconds so we can have someone run up and interfere with it. Sorry.
There's a point where it's like somewhere in the third act, pretty deep in there, where characters falling down an elevator shaft and an alien like catches them with its tail, and it just like looks at them for a while, and I'm like, shouldn't they be dead? Like, shouldn't the alien just immediately be like, and dead?
That's the biggest example, but there's some other small ones as well. So I do want to say though, them going up in the ship after Rain agrees, which, the reason why they want her, because she's like, why do you need me for this? Like, are you just like, is Tyler just like, oh, I want to take my girlfriend with me and hopefully she accepts me back for taking her to her dreamland? But it's actually a bit more cynical than that. Basically, they need a Weyland-Yutani droid to open the doors because he speaks quote-unquote mother. He can connect to the computer, and they need him. So that's her ticket onto this team. But yeah, so that sets that up. But once she decides, I do think all the shots of them going up through the atmosphere and then being in space all looks great. Loved all that. Looked fantastic. They connect with the ship, they go on board, and it's just the two guys that go on board, Tyler and Bjorn.
Along with Andy.
And Andy as well, sorry, yes, because he has to open the doors. But, they go looking through, and, like, everything, it's very derelict, and, like, they are a bit confused because they thought this was decommissioned rather than, something. And don't get me wrong, I actually really like the one thing that I do think that should always be a part, to an extent, of an alien movie is the idea of arriving somewhere and a lot of stuff has already went down. And I do kind of appreciate that as we see some more things on this station, it becomes clear that this station had its own alien movie before these characters got here. And I like that because it kind of works as a sequel, because we can kind of fill in the blanks. We never have to go back and tell that story, although I have no doubt there's going to be a comic book or something that's going to just completely tell that story.
Hold on, let me look up Marvel's latest solicits. I guarantee you.
But I really like the idea of like just it's because it's the same in Aliens when they arrive on the colony and they're like seeing like the test tubes with the face huggers and they can't find any of the humans and like what happened here? It was a war zone, and you start to like piece together. Oh, they were barricading themselves here or whatever. You start to like fill in the story. And it's kind of fun to do that, right? It's actually the same sort of thing that I like in survival horror games like Resident Evil, where you find the notes, kind of filling in little bits of the blanks about what happened here and how this situation came to be. I like that. I like that stuff.
By the way, Marvel does have a Prelude comic slated for later this month.
Of course.
Yep, absolutely filling in that gap. No, I agree. I think that this everything up to this point, everything even including as they go into the ship, I really do like, because it's all setting up. It's all saying like, okay, every once in a while there's going to be like an anti-gravity pulse, well, like a normal gravity pulse, because usually they're in 0G. And they set that up that it's like on clockwork. They set up the reason why they
fix it.
Yeah, and they fix it so that way they can walk through normally, because that would have been expensive.
But it is worth mentioning though, there's a good bit here where they're floating around and then the gravity comes back on because it's coming back on and off, and the asshole character like falls like 15 feet and like hurts his back, and that was actually a little bit funny. I'm like, yeah, you should probably have tried to float towards like, you know, wherever the floor technically is right now.
I'm fully calling that on him though, because the first time that they have it, they're in a tight corridor, so it doesn't matter at all. They call it out. They say this happens like clockwork, and then he still decides to float into the middle of the giant empty hangar with nothing around. That's on him. Yeah,
actually, the vent they go in when that first happens. Now, I think the vent is based on a vent in the first Alien movie, but it made me think of Alien Isolation, the video game, because you constantly go in and out of those vents. So that sort of circular like metal design that opens up, I was like, oh, that's just giving me flashbacks. There is actually an Easter egg for the game, though, in the set design. There's these telephones that are around. They look like payphones. Those were the safe stations in the video game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, but with everything else that was going on pretty much up until the inciting incident, I thought it did a great job of, it kept setting up this thing of, even when they find the cryopods, even when they get to them and say, okay, we got them, this is what we need, there's a problem. They don't have enough fuel to last the whole 9 years, so they need to go deeper into the ship to go get more cryo fuel. And it's just doing a fantastic job of, okay, the characters have, like, obviously they have to come across the aliens. We have to get to that point, but it never feels forced. It never feels like, oh, wait, guys, hold on. Let's see if we could get anything else off this ship. Let's see if like we could bring some food or something.
I also do appreciate that it takes its time before we get to the first alien. You know, it does spend a good 25 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. You know, I wasn't checking my watch or anything, but you know, it takes a good bit of time before we get to the first hint of aliens, and I like that, right? Obviously, the first big hint is that there's a big hole that's clearly been made from acid and like a half like droid lying on the floor, and you're like, oh, I know it's done that, and they're like, what? That's weird, but all right, we have to go and try and get these nitrogen fuel cell things.
I think they specifically say like, oh, this must have been some sort of chemical leak or something. Like that's the only thing that could have caused this much acid, but kind of weird that everybody on the ship died. Oh well.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, they're not seeing dead bodies, though, so they don't know they're all dead.
That's true. They just see the dead droid, and they just, I guess, assume that he dissolved in half because his fingers were also dissolved.
Yeah. So they go into this sort of cooling area, and as soon as they go in, though, like the place kind of locks shut. I think it's when they take out the first power cell is when it like all locks up, and now Andy's like not got the clearance to open it. Now it's like you have to be a level 6 to get through here.
The science director or whatever.
So they're freaking out. But the main thing in here though is that it's got, and this is actually what I thought was going to be the subtle reference to Covenant, because if you remember at the end of Covenant when David was putting the embryos in the drawer, it was very similar sort of plastic, sort of vacuum sealed kind of like packets, but there's these face huggers in the packets. And they were frozen in here, but now that they've taken out the power cells for the freezer, they're starting to thaw. So this is us building up to the big face huggers. They're getting out and they're coming after them. It's also implied, I didn't actually catch this, and I'm glad someone else noticed this and I read this. Maybe you did, but it was implied in one of the computers or something that, because I was thinking, well, they don't have a queen, so how did they get all these face huggers? It's actually implied that they were printing the facehuggers, that they actually engineered them from the DNA from the xenomorph.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with that if they have a reason for it. My thing is, because of the stuff that happened in Prometheus and then more importantly Covenant, because Ridley Scott still does have some hand in this, obviously not directing, but he has some hand in it, I still feel like we might be down the timeline where Aliens is not necessarily canon.
He can go F himself, because it absolutely is.
No, absolutely. To every fan that exists, absolutely. But I still think we might be in that path.
I don't think so. I because this is the only thing, and there's a reason for it. Like, they were printing, because I did notice the facehuggers look a bit different, look a bit darker, and I wonder if that's because they're artificial facehuggers, effectively. You know, they've made them as best they can, like Jurassic Park with the DNA, but it's not quite accurate. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting all the same. But this actually encourages the others. You know, at least two of them. The main girl, Rain, and then Navarro, who was the pilot. Yeah, she comes on the ship, and they come to try and help get them out.
Yeah, and at this point, Kay, the final remaining girl in the group, she has already revealed that she's pregnant by just some random dude. But they're hoping to get off the planet.
You say random, I think it was implied it was a dickhead. There was a couple of moments.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, I felt like they were implying, because when she said some asshole, I think the joke was almost, it's the asshole we all know.
That's possible.
I could be wrong.
Here's the thing.
I could be wrong.
Because I didn't know that they were siblings.
You thought it was Tyler?
Yeah, because of his, like, as soon as she started freaking out about it, she says she's pregnant. That's the first he's hearing of it later on.
Yeah.
And he starts freaking out about it, saying, and like you see on his face this like realization. I thought like, oh, they're implying that he's the father, and like she wasn't telling him because they're good friends or whatever. But no, if they're siblings, clearly that's not what they were going for.
No. Unless they were taking a really weird turn.
That would have been a very strong turn.
What I will say is that when they introduced that she was pregnant, I did think, okay, you know, motherhood is a big theme in the first two Alien movies, so
yeah,
it makes sense to have a pregnant character.
They also specifically show her, like, the character of Rain, like, touching her stomach and, like, showing that, and she's throwing up, she's getting morning sickness at this point. And obviously, in the Alien franchise, having something in your stomach is not a good thing. So you're just waiting for that little, like, oh, let's see how they're going to pay that off, because it's going to be horrifying.
So, yeah, they come running in. They try and break them out. There's a bunch of stuff here. Basically, they get the chip out of the neck of the android that was lying on the floor, because that has the security clearance to open the door. And it's like, hey, put this, because there's a little gap in the door. So like, hey, put this in Andy's neck, and he can then use that clearance to get out. But he has to reboot when this happens, so he sort of stands there kind of just frozen when the facehuggers come out. So we get like an extended sequence here of like the two guys like try to like bat the facehuggers away. I did like the moment here where the facehugger jumps at the asshole character, but because he just happens to have his like sort of shotgun or the baton that he's like carrying.
Yeah, he's got like a taser stick.
He has that in like front of his face, and it kind of like blocks the facehugger from grabbing him properly. If I was to make a mild critique, I will say these two like fight off these facehuggers in this room for quite some time, which does maybe make it feel like maybe a little easy to fight them off, because they're, you know, it's very tense, but at the same time, like in the original movie, like if you were in a room with a facehugger without a weapon, like that damn thing was, you know, like getting on you.
All right, so this is just my one time I'll bring this up, because it's not really a valid complaint, but it is something that I was struggling with for large swaths of the movie, and that is they are young. I'm not gonna, you know, they're not kids. It's not like we're following around a bunch of like preteens or whatever trying to fight against aliens and succeeding, but it is something that I keep in mind of, you know, they are still, I would say, early 20s at best. I don't think that they are past that point. So when they do get to be like super hyper competent in a lot of these situations, all I can think of is like Aliens and the Colonial Marines, where these people who are older have trained for this, have gone through all this stuff, and they're still getting their asses handed to them with the same level of knowledge, if not more, on their side. It makes it just a little bit on that realm of, okay, how unbelievable is this really, you know?
It's even one of the things that I brought up in Covenant is that it feels just a little too easy for those characters to deal with the alien versus how difficult it was in the first two movies when, that's the point. It sells them as a very serious threat. It's not as bad in this as it was in that movie, but it did occur to me a little bit here that, these two are fighting off. And I think it's just because they don't want to do the same thing again, but it does kind of make them feel a bit easier to deal with.
Honestly, I think that Aliens being what it was, being able to show how easy it is for someone who is well armed to take out a single xenomorph, kind of just was a disservice to anything that came after it, because it essentially said, like, well, we can't have characters just go up against a single xenomorph anymore. We have to have it be bigger and stronger and, like, more of them. You don't see, like, the Halloween franchise saying, and now there's 7 Michael Myers running around. Like, it's just the one because they made it difficult to deal with that one all the time.
I mean, you're right and you're wrong. And what I mean by that is you're wrong and that they're wrong. They can just go back to a single xenomorph. As long as you present characters who have no means to defend themselves, that's what makes it scary. That's the one thing Alien 3 got right, is that they don't have weapons. How do they deal with it? But at the same time, you're right in that they've kind of maybe had that mantra since then, however mistaken they might be. So anyway, so this is all going on. Eventually, Andy gets them out in there. But I will appreciate, I really like the moment at the end of this scene. And also, in the meantime, what's her face, Navarro, found like a cool like X-ray like scanner thing. It's like it's okay, that's a simple little bit of tech that I appreciate.
They're in the medical bay, she looks through her arms with it, and this is like, well, I wonder where that's going to show soon.
Well, to be fair, it also makes a lot of sense that if these people were working with xenomorphs and facehuggers, that they probably needed one of these little handy scanners around for exactly what you think they need it for. So
I also love the fact, like, yes, it's an X-ray thing and it's set into some distant future or whatever, but all I could think is, like, she's just using this willy-nilly on her arm, and I'm like, well, now you have cancer. Hope you're appreciative of that. I'm
going to assume it's different tech than
probably
our present day X-rays, but I mean, if not, I mean, she's not going to last that long anyway. It doesn't matter. But she tests it on her arm and it just sets that up, so that's fun. But I really appreciated the kind of the build up to it, because as much as I said, I arguably don't like how easy they're able to just like keep dodging the facehuggers for like what feels like 5 minutes in this room whilst the android's waking up, and eventually he grabs a facehugger with his arm and it's like, oh, he's up, right, he's going to get them out. They do a whole thing here where he goes to shut the door and is shutting just in time to block the facehuggers, but just one is able to like slip through in time. And we follow it sort of run around, and it actually goes past one or two people and eventually jumps up and gets onto Navarro's face. And it's like, finally, I do think I see what they were going for here, because there is kind of an excitement to it finally getting on someone's face. It's kind of like they were teasing, like they were cock teasing us for like 3 minutes, and then finally it gets on someone's face. And I'm like, okay, I see what they were going for there. And the payoff was entertaining. Like, it was fun. This shot of the facehugger darting from side to side and finally getting on her. It was like, okay, all right, that works. I get what they were doing. And I also appreciate that immediately, like, they have like an idea that, no one in the previous movies tried. They're like, hey, we've got this liquid nitrogen kind of spray here. What if we freeze it? Do you think it would force it off without killing her?
Because they already know about the acid blood at this point, because this is by the point where the thing wakes up. Our new character.
Oh, the droid, You don't see who he is quite yet, but you see him sort of wake up and kind of, he sort of screams at them and whatever, you get a bit of a jump scare. But yes, this leads us into the first big red flag of of the movie.
Yep.
And it's the sort of thing where he was very, shrouded in darkness, he's covered in like the milk blood and whatever. But there was a moment here just before they like hook him up to find out what he knows, where like I saw a bit of his shirt, and I'm like, oh wait, I recognize that light blue shirt. Actually, speaking of shirts, I did think it was funny. I noticed that our main character Rain was wearing a Weyland-Yutani shirt, and I thought it was especially funny that it was the exact same color and also just as faded as the one I'm wearing right now. I thought that was amusing to me, but
don't let Pete fool you. He bought that shirt just for this movie.
I've had this shirt for like 13 years. That's why it's so faded. But it's just funny. I was like, oh, she's wearing my shirt, except she cut off the sleeves. All right, because she's hip, I guess.
Well, because we need to end this movie with her in a tank top in order to get us to the aliens moment.
Can Yeah, okay. I've got more to say. I've got more to say on that. You're jumping ahead. You're blowing your load, David. Keep it in your pants.
I'm sorry. Let's talk about the big red flag.
Big red flag. Yes. All right. So you get a shot from behind, and it starts to, and we've had scenes in the Alien movies before where they're sort of reanimating like half an android. Alien 3 specifically with Bishop was a scene I remembered, which actually makes this extra frustrating because that scene in Alien 3 was largely an animatronic, and it looked pretty good for what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have done that here. They could have had an animatronic, but they don't have an animatronic. They have dead actor Ian Holm and his uncanny valley terrible CG face.
Yeah.
It looks atrocious. And of course it's a giant fan service and don't get me wrong, it's not that it doesn't make sense from a logic perspective. Obviously we know that there's multiple versions of every android type, right? Like we had that with just David and Walter in the prequels, right? So it makes sense that there would be other ones of Ash going around. He's not called Ash though, he's called Rook. Right, yes. He's a different name, just like David and Walter. That makes sense.
It was once they started doing the chess naming scheme with Rook and Bishop.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Very good, David. Because I think in the movie I heard Rook and went, okay, how does that relate to Ash? I was trying to think of how to connect Rook and because I assumed there had to be a connection. But you're right, it's a connecting to Bishop.
It's bridging the two.
Yes,
it's getting it across.
It's bridging them. But as soon as I saw and this is this thing, it's not even as soon as I saw it actually, it's like I knew what they were about to reveal, and I got that sinking feeling. I'm like, no, please don't do this. I know you're going to, but please don't do it. And then they did it, and I'm like, you don't need to do this. This is so distracting. And I think what's even worse, and it doesn't come till later the line that's really egregious, but he quotes Ash from Alien, and I'm like, you have no reason to say the exact same thing he did, right? You're something about the chance of survival are slim, but I wish you the best. That's not the exact line, but it's that. Yeah. But it's exactly the line that he said in Alien. He says it later, and it'd be one thing if it was just this scene, and I thought, okay, they did their egregious cameo. It's not even a cameo because he's literally dead. But
no, he is a character in this movie.
Yeah, he comes back. He comes back over the comms, and he's still sitting in that table talking to them over the ship's systems. So he's like in 4 or 5 scenes. It's actually nuts. I was like, why are we going back to this? Stop it.
Unplug him, put him in the trash. We're done now.
But the big thing that happens as a result of this, though, we'll go talk about some of the exposition. And this is the other problem with this scene, is that he just sits there and gives them a bucket of exposition. But is that because Andy now has this different chip or whatever it is inside his neck, he now is no longer broken. He's acting fully functional. His accent's changed. He's now got an English accent.
Yeah. And before he has like a little stutter all the time. That's completely wiped away.
And I think he had an American accent before this as well, right?
I couldn't tell you.
I think I
spent so long with the other version, I'm not sure.
It was definitely different, though. If it wasn't American, it was definitely different. But regardless, the idea being that maybe he now has a different like directive, right? And Ian Holm even says that to him.
They specifically say after he finishes and like he's speaking more normally and fluently, they're just like, bro, what happened to you? And he's like, oh, I got an update. Like putting that thing in my head, I connected to the servers and just got like a full update. I'm now on par with what I should be nowadays. But yeah, Ian Holm pulls out basically saying like, when you got the update, we fixed your prime directive stuff. So as much as always do what's best for Rhaenys there, your number one directive has switched over to do whatever's best for the company. So as much as he's trying to help our group, he's also trying to help Wayland get the alien stuff.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, and I was kind of interested in this when they introduced it, because I was like, okay, he's going to have to fight this new programming, and that could be quite an uplifting thing if he does. And that moment never actually comes, bizarrely, because by the time he gets to Atlic himself again, it's because the chip's been taken out, so it's not like he even like overcomes something in the movie, so that was a little bit frustrating for me. Yeah,
they try to play the moment where he does, but it's really just Rain pointing out, like, look, if you what?
Save it, because that's the scene with the line. So we're
oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Fair enough.
Right.
All right.
Any moment they could have had is undercut with the most egregious goddamn fan service, and that's after this Ash Rook stuff.
I was gonna say, you think this is as bad as the fan service gets? Oh boy.
Oh, But yeah, so I'm kind of splitting over two scenes here because I can't remember which exposition he gives in this scene and which he gives when they get to the lab area.
I mean, the lab area is just basically talking about all the stuff that you want to forget. So if it's any of that, it's there.
I think so. He explains a bunch of stuff. He says it's been 20 years since the Nostromo, but a few months ago,
Yeah, I think this is the sequence where he literally like turns them around and the alien is just crucified up there.
Yeah, and that's meant to be the original alien from the first movie. But he explains the Nostromo was 20 years ago, but recently, a few months, they found the wreckage and they found this species and they were doing whatever. And obviously, this is all the fallout of their hubris.
Yes.
So fancy that. It always seems to happen.
You'd think they would learn after the... Well, I guess each movie has at least like a couple decades between it, if not centuries. So I guess they forget over the years.
Yeah, and this is technically a relatively early one now, because in the timeline it's, just after Alien.
Yeah.
But, it does raise the question where you're thinking, okay, because this is a question I had once they get to this bit, and this is really confirmed it's 20 years after Alien, but 30 plus years before Aliens. I'm like, all right. In Aliens, it's because Ripley tells them about LV-426 that they contact that colony and say, hey, go check out this, bit of land, because they now know where the alien ship is with all the eggs and all that. But if they knew where the Nostromo was 20 years after it blew up, wouldn't that be relatively close still to LV-426 and they'd have found it much sooner?
Makes sense. I mean, they did set down the whole colony out there before Ripley woke up. So
you think this was them just building up to that the whole time?
I don't know what to think, honestly. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Like I obviously they got to LV-426 without Ripley's involvement. They have the entire thing set up. So perhaps maybe they saw the Nostromo was out there and they were like, okay, because it's out here, but we don't know exactly where it came from, let's just seed around a little bit. Let's just set a whole bunch of different things out in this area. And when you know it, this is also really, really close to where Mr. Wayland died all those years ago in Prometheus. Ain't that funny? So let's just seed that out a bit more there.
That was 423, David. That's miles away.
Really close.
Oh, dear. So yeah. We'll leave the exposition. We'll come back to it when we get to the lab, because that's where the rest of this stuff really comes out.
But they came up with the idea of, we've got the cryo stuff, let's try freezing the tail so that way the acid blood doesn't immediately destroy her, because they know it has acid blood.
Yeah, and sure enough, it comes off. It actually is successful, right? And it scurries down the hole that was made earlier by the acid. And they're like, okay, is she fine? And Ian Holm just says, 40-60. And it's like, what do you mean it's 40-60? Well, it depends if the facehugger had time to finish its job. Like, did it implant or did it not?
Deposit its seed.
So obviously they want to take her back to the ship. And this is where Ian Holm is convinced Andy just enough that maybe it's better for all of them if she doesn't go back yet until they know if she's safe or not, because she might contaminate everyone else. This is the quarantine thing. Yeah,
so this was earlier on in the movie. They showed the reason why Bjorn absolutely hates Andy and is such like a dick to him. And it's because a synth basically killed his parents because there was a leak in the mine or something. So the synth made the call in order to save like a dozen different miners. They had to seal off the cave for like 3 or 4 of them, and his parents were the unlucky ones there. And we basically just get the moment where Rain comes to the realization of, synths are allowed to kill people, but they are allowed to do things for the greater good in order to make sure that a greater number of people survive, the utilitarian approach.
Yeah, which I do think still doesn't make me sympathize with Bjorn in any way, because ultimately it's a purely logical choice that was programmed into him, so you can't really blame the synth for making that choice. Like, you understand the rules it was given, and it's it's facilitating those rules. You can be mad at like the decisions that were made by the programmers, by the company, for people who said this is what you do, but he still just comes across as an asshole the entire time. He never.
Yeah, I mean it's the sort of thing where I fully accept and respect his mourning, his grief, and him wanting to lash out at that over people that remind him of it. But ultimately, Andy didn't have anything to do with it, so there's no reason to be a dick to him.
Maybe if they'd just given him 1 or 2 moments where he did something likable or was nice to other people, it might have like made him more diverse as a character, and we could sort of see, okay, he's got, you know, positives and flaws, but instead we just get dick mode the entire time.
Yeah, I think the only thing we get is he's about to stumble after he's like threatening Andy. He's about to stumble backwards into the hole made by the acid, and Andy like grabs him, and it seems like a real tense moment because we don't see the hole, and Bjorn is freaking out. He's just like, I was just joking, man. I was just kidding. I wouldn't do anything like that. And it just goes to show that like all the bravado, all the dicgishness he has is literally just an act. Like he is just a kid underneath it all.
So, yeah, this next section is effectively Bjorn takes Navarro back to the ship quickly because she just got the facehugger off. He wants to get her off there, and to the point where he actually like takes off on the ship and leaves our main pair and Tyler behind on the station. But of course, as soon as they get on the ship, Navarro starts to feel something, right? She feels something in her chest. So she pulls out the X-ray scanner she stole from her bag. And I remember this is like the one cool moment from the trailer I remember, is her like holding it behind her back or in front of her so she could see the chest burster try to like thump its way. You can see it headbutting her chest from the inside.
It breaks one of her ribs. You see it actually break in her chest.
I was like, that's cool. That's shown us a new perspective and something that we've already, done a million times at this point, but we get to see a cool new way of showing it. And she's freaking out, and of course we get our version of the chest buster in this movie, which is fun. And it, obviously, as she's like freaking out and like having the seizure that comes with it, she kicks like the control stick for the ship, so it starts to just sort of go to the side, and it was a great moment here with the light of the ship, or their little ship, like shines through the big like corridor inside the station, and you just see this beam of light going across, and eventually it ends up going into the sort of big hangar area and like hits and crashes and all that.
It on the way there, it accidentally ruptures like a fuel container or something like that. And they said much earlier on that there was a time limit because this planet that they're orbiting around has rings, and obviously those are a bunch of debris. If their ships run into the rings, then they're toast. But the time limit was like 36 hours because after 36 hours, this derelict ship would just ram into the rings. But because they ruptured the fuel tank and caused the big explosion, it changed the trajectory, and now they've only got like half an hour to get off this ship.
I think it was like 45 minutes is what they said. But that's something we knew almost as soon as they get on the station. It was revealed to everyone that, oh hey, we've got about 36 hours before this station collides with the rings and it'll explode basically or whatever. But that's plenty of time. This is only going to take like half an hour, maybe an hour.
20 minutes, no problem.
So it's okay, and I like that. I like there's a timer, but it's not a self-destruct, but it's just like a self-destruct. It's like, hey, we're on a clock, things are counting down, right? Good fun. It all makes sense.
It also makes sense as to why, like, obviously the Wayland people down on the planet know that there's a problem, like, on that ship. It makes sense as to why they didn't send up any sort of, like, rescue or anything like that, or anything to, like, get the stuff off the ship, because it's like, well, it's going to be gone in, like, a day and a half, so...
Well, that's not actually how I read that, funnily enough. I read that as, because later on, when Ian Holmes explaining that, you've done a good job getting this vial of liquid or whatever, he says it'll take 6 months for the message to reach Weyland-Yutani, and then they'll come and collect it. So I was thinking this was just purely a case of, like, space travel takes a long time. They can't get to the station before it collides. And they could maybe tell this mining colony, but, like, do they have the means to go up and deal with this? I don't know.
That's fair. There probably isn't anybody on the planet that can deal with it, but yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about how long it would take for the message just to get between planets.
Yeah. I wasn't even really thinking about it until Ian Holmes said that later, that it's going to take 6 months before the company even knows you've done this. And I'm like, oh, well, that explains why no one's came and got this station yet, is because it's just whatever's happened's been recent, and that's it.
So we really hope that all of your broken bones heal right, because we will not be able to do anything about that.
In fact, they specifically say they found in the Nostromo like 3 months ago. So there's not even been enough time for the message of, hey, we found in the Nostromo. That's not made it back to the company yet.
True.
That puts in perspective like how slow the communication is. So interesting. But So this is actually where we get to one of the interesting set pieces. They sort of add to the alien lore a little bit. And I've seen some disagreements online about people liking or disliking this, but they set up this idea because they're on the Remus, what's the other one?
Remus,
thank you, the Remus side, and they have to cross into the other half, the Romulus side. But to do that, they have to go through these hallways. But by this point, the face huggers have like went into this hallway, and they can see them through the door, and it's all that, right?
Yeah.
And they get to this conclusion where Andy, with his android brain and whatnot, is like, oh, the readings from this station say that they sense people. Obviously, they can hear, right? They do have other sensories, but they don't have eyes. They primarily use temperature to sense. And I actually kind of like this. I won't call it a theme per se, but it was something that was like consistent throughout the movie, was the idea of temperature, because instead of having a motion sensor coming out of the ship, Tyler had like a temperature sensor, and it was like sort of scanning the hallways or whatever for heat. I felt like they did that intentionally to get you thinking about temperature, so that when they brought this idea up, is like, hey, we can probably sneak through here if we're quiet, as long as the room is the same temperature as we are, and therefore they won't be able to discern. I'm like, okay, it's a little Predator-esque, but I'm not against it.
No, it's absolutely fine. Quick question just about international differences. They showed the temperature gauge on the wall as it was heating up. Was yours in Celsius or Fahrenheit?
I don't remember.
Do you know what they were heating it up to, like the number?
I don't remember. No.
Okay, that's fine. Because mine was 98.6, and that's, Fahrenheit human body temperature. I was curious if across the pond they were heating it up to like 20 whatever or 30 whatever.
I don't think they would change it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think I want to say body heat's between like 30 and 37 or something like that Celsius.
Okay.
Something like
that. All right. Fair enough.
But no, I doubt they changed it, because I don't think they normally change that. I think they just expect people here to understand that Fahrenheit's a thing.
Trust me, if it was in America and it was the opposite way around, we'd be like, what do you mean you're heating it up to 37 degrees? That's really cold.
I do remember they once changed the title of a Mel Gibson movie, which was called Get the Gringo, because people in the UK don't know what gringo means.
That's fair.
So I think it got changed to something like My Summer Vacation or something like that.
I mean, that was America couldn't even handle the idea of the Philosopher's Stone.
Oh, yeah, because philosophers are really... Like, sorcerers are way more common than philosophers.
Yeah. Look, America doesn't know nothing about philosophy. Let me tell you that right now.
But sorcery, a totally real thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's something Americans know about. Yeah, that's actually a funny case where they actually did all those scenes with both lines. Every time they brought up Philosopher's Stone, they recorded a version where they said Sorcerer's Stone instead. So it's really weird that they went to that much effort, when I'm like, just call it Philosopher's Stone. Like, what the hell?
Just stop doing the different stuff, man. We can accept it. People are online nowadays. We live in a global culture.
Yeah. We can just learn that there's more than one word for the same thing. It's not that hard.
No.
Anyway, so yeah, we get this scene. It reminds me of a scene actually in Train to Busan when they have to sneak through a train car full of zombies that are all sleeping. So it's like this really tense, like we have to be quiet. But that's what this is, and I thought it was like a fun idea for a set piece. If anything, I think the weirder thing about this was that it didn't feel like it had a big ending, because it felt like it was just the other stuff going on in the ship kind of like stalled them, and then it just kind of ended abruptly.
Oh yeah, I mean that's absolutely. Because there were two options here. Either option A, they make it through without any sort of problem, which obviously is not that satisfying in its own right. Or option B, something beyond their control goes wrong, and then they have to just book it.
Yeah, but you do it in a way where like, oh, they get across just barely safely, and it seems fine. It's very tense and slow. But then someone realizes that they dropped something vital in the back halfway down the call, so they have to go back or something. You can milk it. You can do things with it.
I mean, for me, my first thing that went in my mind is they waited. We get this whole sequence of them waiting outside the room, waiting for it to heat up. And then Andy gives the rules. He specifically says, like, sweat and goosebumps are a sign of your body, like, trying to cool itself down. So don't sweat, don't get goosebumps, and you'll be fine. And then immediately the first thing they do is they open the door and they just leave it open. And I'm like, shouldn't all of that warm air that you spent so long building up just go flooding out of the room and all of a sudden it's cooler in there again?
Now, to be fair, there was a line about the hall they were in also heating up to match the room, so that when the door opened, it wouldn't. Yeah. They did at least address that. I mean, admittedly, maybe shutting it with this, but maybe they were like, oh well, that's just an extra noise. Let's not do that.
Yeah, we're not gonna touch any more buttons than we have to.
Let's just start moving. But of course, as this is happening, all the stuff over, with the others is happening, and we're hearing some of that over the comms, which makes it a bit tense.
Yeah, we got the chestburster got out and all that. Kay is freaking out, and I think all of the sequence for Bjorn plays out here. So
yes,
they go down into their ship, and their ship, by the way, I saw the name of it earlier. It's like the Corbalin, something like that. It's crashed in the hangar. It's caused a whole big problem there with the airlock being automatically shut, but they are making their way deeper down, and they come across, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've ever seen this, which is there's a cocoon that essentially is, how do we get from tiny little thing that's small enough to come out of a chest to full xenomorph? And it is just a vagina.
Right. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say all of it's a vagina, but yes, the opening part is absolutely a vagina. It's just a big sack. It's like a big ball sack with a vagina on it, right? So
this feels like dialogue for South Park.
Right. Yeah, this is interesting because I saw this and went, wait, are they doing the thing from Alien Director's Cut? And I went, no, because that's not what this is. This is not how they make more eggs. This is just the transition of like little xenomorph into big xenomorph. Which is interesting because some of the other sequels definitely have just shown us like, a half-size one, like halfway through the process, indicating it just grows up quick. It's not about, but this is saying, no, there's a process it goes through to do it relatively quickly. But they see this like sack, and Bjorn's still got his shock stick. So he does a whole thing where he just sort of like sticks it in the vagina and like turns it on, and he just sort of gets a zap, and he pulls it out, and it seems to have been effective, but it's all melted with acid because obviously he's like drawn.
Yeah, there's acid blood still in there.
He's drawn some blood, but then you just see like the tip of the tails like sort of hanging out the sack, and then it just sort of like comes to life, and I
think it slashes his face, and then he falls down to the ground, and the acid blood is just dripping down onto him.
Yeah. In fact, if anything, it even spits some more acid at him, like from the hole. So you get like him having bits of acid on his chest, but you get like see his fingers like completely corrode to the bone.
Yep.
It's really quite cool. Like I was hoping he was going to get like a vicious death, and this is pretty mean. This is it's
pretty brutal.
Yeah, this is you don't get much more brutal than this, to be honest. So this was perfectly fine. So all very good.
But all that time, Kay is just kind of down the hallway watching it happen. So as the alien, who we said was maybe affected by this, ultimately not enough to kill it. So it starts emerging from this cocoon.
It's weird to say it takes something from AVP, but it does kind of here. The idea that we can recognize one specific xenomorph because they've got like a scar or something. Because in that movie, it was like a grid from the Predator net. Here, this one, and I didn't even notice it in this scene, but later on I noticed it when you see it again. It's got like a sort of wound and like a sort of sparky area from where it got shocked. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So we know what the alien is that came from the, Because keep in mind, up until this point, it's only one xenomorph. We have not seen any other xenomorphs. We think it's just this one, and that's all fine. So yeah.
So Kay is basically just trying to escape as slowly as she can here, and she reaches a locked door, and because it's locked, she presses a comm button, which then activates the headset that's on Tyler as he's creeping through the room. And he has to basically talk her down very quietly, which I feel like as soon as you get the first beep on that comm, it should immediately trigger all the face huggers. We shouldn't have this long, drawn-out thing of them turning around being like, what?
They really treat the face huggers in this like a lot of scurrying spiders. Every time you see like a bunch of them, and they're just sort of all prattling on, like, So they basically run for it. They do get through the door. Although here, what's interesting is that Andy gets through first. He hits the button for the door, and Tyler just makes it in no more, right? And Rain says, hey, you shut that too late. You almost didn't let get Tyler in. And he's like, no, that was perfect timing. I calculated it perfectly. That's better than last time. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. This is exactly what happened before, but a facehugger got through. So he actually timed it better, but it did kind of look like Yes, but was he doing this thinking that Tyler was expendable? Did he care if Tyler got back through the door? That's the question it wants the audience to be thinking about here.
And you even see it on Rain's face, because obviously prior to his upgrade chip, he has always just been kind and loving and like would never do anything like that. But now he's like more or less not deceitful, but he is making these tougher calls, and it's a thing you can see her wrestle with, of like, that's not the brother I've known my whole life. I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, I think at one point Tyler says, like, is he trying to like kill them or kill him or something like that? And she's like, I'm not sure. Like, I actually don't know if he's trying to kill someone for the right reasons, as it may be. But yeah, so they end up, they shut the door behind them, and they're able to go up to the door that Kay is at, and she's like begging to get out, and it's got the little scanner thing for the finger, and he's like, hey, Andy, open the door to let her out, and he goes to do it, but then he pauses and realizes, no, that's a bad idea, because then the monster will get out here. This is the unsafe option.
You can see it perching, just waiting up above for the door to open up.
Yeah, and Andy even theorizes that the alien's waiting for them to open the door. The alien's smart. It wants us to open the door. So it's waiting, and that's why it's letting her stand there and bang against the door for so long. And it's not until the alien realizes, oh, they're not going to open the door, I'll just go kill her. Or, well, turns out he doesn't kill her, but, he'll take her for cocooning or, gestation purposes.
Yeah. She's clearly fit to be a mother. She's already proven that. So we're just going to give her another one.
Which does raise an interesting question of what does anything different happen if a pregnant woman gets face hugged? Got
me. I mean, obviously we get to see some results of something, but it ain't face hugging.
Well, I mean, there's a debate if that's. I feel like that's more likely what she injects herself with rather than being face hugged whilst pregnant. I don't think she got face hugged. No.
If I had to assume, I'd assume it's like any other sort of parasite where it would just do its normal thing, and then, like, it doesn't matter if the host is pregnant or whatever. It moves fast enough that's just going to kill the host.
Maybe it's like a Blade thing where the kid will be born but have a couple of special alien abilities.
Yeah.
half xenomorph, half human. I don't know.
It's just got that tongue thing that can open up at the end of the tongue. Oh. That's the only special thing it gets.
Ugh. So yeah. Basically, yeah, she gets pulled away. We don't see her quite die, and that's fair enough because we find out later on she's still alive. She's like just cocooned up in a wall, like we see in a lot of these movies. But of course, Tyler during all this is like he's literally on his knees begging him to open the door, and Andy says no. And after she gets grabbed and pulled away, like obviously the tone turns very somber, and Rain turns around and slaps Andy. And this is someone that she's been referring to as her brother. That's how she sees him. But now she's like not sure what he's doing, and she's like, "Oh, I need to take that chip out." And this may not be the scene, but whenever she says that somewhere around here, he says, "No, that's not what's best for the company." So it's kind of like a blocker now.
Yeah, she specifically asked, "Hey, what's your prime directive?" And he's like saying it in the way of like trying to trigger the thing of like, "You're supposed to be doing what's best for me," but then he turns back and is like, "Actually, it's changed. I care about the company now. Anyway, let's keep going."
Yeah. So presumably we get to the lab quite quickly after this.
Yeah, I can't find anything else in the plot that's between there. So they get to the lab. Rook pops over the thing, and he basically is like, "All right, have I got something that's gonna piss Pete off?" I cannot express the joy on my face as this scene progressed. I was so happy.
Oh, I'm sure you were. I would like nothing more than just to forget that those prequels never existed. And to be fair, this isn't too bad in the sense. I mean, keep in mind it's sort of made worse by the fact that we've got CG Ian Holm like explaining it all, which is just worse on top of it all. But I was like, okay, you know what? This is them admitting that they're never going to do a follow-up to Covenant. So all you're going to get is this. You're going to get just a sort of little connection that says, yes, that goo that came from Prometheus is still a relevant thing. The backstory that Mr. Wayland went to a planet looking for whatever did happen in some form. May not be exactly what went down. I mean, there's nothing actually, other than the fact that the facehuggers are packed in those like trays and drawers, just like the end of Covenant. There's actually nothing in this, what he says here, that says that anything in Covenant actually happened. It just confirms some of Prometheus.
Yeah. I mean, you're right in that regard, but I would have to assume that Prometheus and Covenant, like, if that's where we're drawing the branching timeline to say Covenant didn't happen, but Prometheus did, that just seems like splitting hairs at that point.
What I'm suggesting is an alternate Prometheus happened where it didn't end in a cliffhanger. It just ended in a way that made sense, and it's fine.
The ship took off from the planet, didn't have enough fuel, immediately crashed down, everyone died. The end.
Yes.
Cool.
That's what I'm saying. But yeah, he basically explains that they extracted from the alien and did a lot of work on it to basically make this retroactively make this goo, and he says this is the same goo that Mr. Wayland was looking for, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, that's fine. As he says this though, the like hologram thing like basically creates the sort of the urn that this stuff came in Prometheus, and I thought, wait a minute, how do you know what the container looked like though? Because you've just extracted what the substance is from this xenomorph in some form. Which, by the way, none of this does anything to explain how you get from the end of Covenant to the start of Alien, and they should never even try and fill that in because it would be a convoluted mess.
Oh,
so
yeah, absolutely.
Let's not do that.
But that's probably how they found out the urn. They were like, oh, yes, one of our androids, David, returned, and he was pretending to be Walter, and all that stuff.
I guess. I don't know what to think about it. It's awful.
No, obviously don't. All this movie says is it pulls up the black goo and they say, we get it from the alien, like it's the face huggers, it's basically their blood, and it is the justification of how it is able to be the perfect creature, the perfect hunter and all that, is because
perfect
it can evolve
organism
super quickly.
Ian Holm loves saying perfect organism because he said that in Alien. Remember Alien, David?
I do remember Alien.
So... yeah, like I didn't like them bothering to even tie in like and say that those movies happened. But if they were going to do it, if this is all they're doing, fine, right? It's one quick scene. It's a thing that happened in the lore. We can move on with our lives. And they're saying, hey, part of Weyland-Yutani's goal is not just to have a bioweapon. This is kind of a new thing as well. We actually want to use this to basically like evolve human beings because, hey, it turns out like terraforming all these worlds is hard, and they said this earlier on in the film that there's like new diseases from the mines like every year, and it's like a big problem. And he's like, hey, Weyland-Yutani want to advance human beings so that we can actually survive in space. Humans weren't built for it, and this is going to fix that. So it's like, okay, so the job that he wanted Andy to do was to get these vials of this black goo and keep them safe, like take them back out of the moon and have them for Weyland-Yutani to come pick up.
It wasn't also specifically like the black goo. It's like a refined version. Like it's something scientists have been working on, because they showed that there's a rat that they essentially just smash with a hammer.
Yes.
And then they give it the black goo and it just like Cronenberg's its way back to being normal. And it's like, look, see, it can survive like even the most deadly things. We're going to get this to people and everything's going to be fine. And then as they're leaving the room, there's a few more things in between, but as they're leaving the room, we see the rat's cage after all these months, and it's this horrible mutated creature of just like black tentacles and stuff coming off of it. So clearly it's not a good thing to inject into human beings.
Yeah, not a good idea. I don't think so. Okay, this is fine, whatever. Like, Weyland-Yutani's got goals. But this is like obviously between having the android that looks like Ash, right, and having the CG face, bringing up the Prometheus stuff, and of course as he says it, do 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 do, the tune comes in, and I'm like, come on, what are you doing to me?
I loved it so much.
I bet you did.
God.
By the way, the same thing happened when Rook started speaking earlier. The Alien theme came in, the old one. But this is also where I started to like, okay, this is a lot of referencing. This is starting to feel a bit much. I hope this is it. I hope they're done now, and that's all it is. And the very next thing is like, hey, there's weapons in here, and Andy like pulls out the pulse. And I didn't even necessarily mind that they have pulse rifles that look similar to the pulse rifle in Aliens, even though it's like 30 years prior, whatever. Yeah. The thing that made it feel like egregious here and felt like a lot of fan service was that, Tyler happens to know how to use them. So you remember that scene in Aliens where Hicks is showing Ripley how to use a pulse rifle? Mm-hmm. We're getting that again because he's like, hey, hold it this way, and he's standing behind her. It's the same shot.
Yeah. But see, that's why we made this all kids, because, hey, Tyler, how do you know about this? I play a lot of video games.
Oh, that reason was annoying. That
Yeah.
that made me cringe.
Yeah.
I will say this
So-
pulse rifle is a little bit different though, and it's kind of cool because it has an auto targeting feature and
Yeah.
basically says, hey, as long as you aim it vaguely in the right direction, it'll take care of the aiming. So you're fine.
And honestly, I appreciate that because it immediately removes that problem I have of how are these untrained kids able to do so well against all of these creatures. It immediately just says like, nope, this is built for scientists who also can't aim, you're good.
That's perfectly fine. I like the little holster thing that sort of went, under her armpit and then sort of like locked in tight, so it's nice and firm. There's a lot of nice little details here to the prop and how it worked and all that. Fine with all that. That's all fine. But then Andy ruins the party by saying, "Oh, but you can't actually shoot the aliens." And they're like, "Wait, why not?" It's like, well, acid for blood, and the acid will keep eroding things until it creates a puncture in the hull. Now, don't get me wrong. I get what you're saying here, and I appreciate them focusing on this a bit more because it's something that's always been like brought up in these movies. But they say, oh, maybe that could eat through the hull, but it never does. It always seems to just sort of stop in time by the time it gets to the hull.
Yeah, I would have much more appreciation for this line if we didn't already see the acid burning through Bjorn and it didn't eat through the hull.
Yeah,
it's still fine.
I think, see if you just said we have to kind of try and like hold back a little bit though, like shoot if you have to, but we don't know how much acid there can be before it's too much and it'll go through, because you assume eventually if there's enough of it, it will just keep going and eventually go through the hull.
Right. Yeah, we even if they were to put it in, like, yes, there's a quantity thing, but also, like, yes, you're auto-aiming, but, like, if a stray bullet pierces the hull, that would also cause a problem. It's like, there's all these reasons why shooting is a lot more dangerous than not shooting, and then they try to justify, like, well, why do we even have guns? And he says, oh, it'll possibly keep the alien at bay because it'll be intimidated.
To be fair, this only contradicts some of the, like, because any alien, they didn't really have guns, right? So it wasn't really a concern in that movie. And aliens are on a planet, so it wasn't a concern there because they're not in space.
Right.
So Alien 3 didn't have guns again. Alien Resurrection's actually the one they're kind of like contradicting, I guess, a little bit, because that was the one where, we're just shooting the aliens even though we're on a ship, and they never really thought about it. So I guess technically it's only Resurrection they're kind of going against, and maybe some of the ones that came after, if I remember.
And even then, that is centuries later. There's the entirety of like, oh, maybe
the hull's tougher.
Yeah. They make guns that can like shoot in space without worrying about a hull or something like that. I don't know.
But regardless, as much as I thought this was a bit of a clunky line, and especially when he said, oh, they're just for intimidation because they know their weapons, like, okay, sure, we'll use intimidation. Like, I almost felt like, would they try to like do like remember that line in Aliens where it's like, oh, we can't fire these weapons because it might like set off a nuke kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like, what are we supposed to do? Use harsh language? I thought was this like a weird like more subtle, to be fair, but was this kind of like a wraparound reference to that?
Yeah, I don't know. I the only thing I could think from it is the meta perspective of why are they not immediately firing the moment they hear like a noise behind them?
Yes.
And I feel like they immediately accomplished that just by showing the gun and saying, you got one clip. You will not have more bullets after that. And that's all they needed. They didn't need this extra thing on top of it of saying, hey, don't shoot because of blood or whatever. You just say one clip, make it count. 450
rounds, and that's all we got. So they're basically trying to get back to their own ship now, right? So they can go back down.
So not Ash, Rook gives them the ultimatum of saying, look, because of all the lockdowns and stuff like that, you can't get your ship off of this unless I say so. So I will open up the airlock if you bring all these little vials back with you. That's the only way that you're getting off planet or off station. So
it's like, okay, fine, I guess we're doing that. But when they go on their way to do this, they get to this scary corridor that's got all the, when aliens,
so spooky.
Aliens change the walls and have all their like gunk and like whatever on the walls. They see this, and this is where it starts to properly tease, oh no, there's a bunch of xenomorphs in the Romulus side of the ship. Yeah. And it makes sense because something caused all this damage and killed everyone before. So bunch of aliens. They had
plenty of people, like all the scientists and stuff, in order to reproduce, or in order for the facehuggers to do that. So yeah, makes sense.
So they come, okay, maybe we should go back or whatever. Like,
I love that sequence. It's Rain just like, so we're gonna turn around now, right? And Andy's like, oh yeah, no, this is stupid. We ain't doing this.
Yes. But then Tyler hears his sister like moan like down the hallway. He's like, oh, we have to go get her. So he just runs down and they're like, oh, I guess we're going. All right.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's a big thing here where they get to like her, they sort of like cut her down and they're like, they don't think she's been impregnated with an alien because there's no dead facehugger like hanging around or anything like that. So it seems like she's okay. They hadn't done that yet. And to be fair, this has actually got some prevalence in the universe because in Aliens, when Newt was taken for a while, she hadn't been facehugged yet either. So it is established. There is precedence for this that sometimes they have them for a little bit before they get facehugged. Yeah,
they put them up there. It's like meal prep, you know? You just hold off on it for a few days, and then when the facehugger shows up, there you go.
So they get to this elevator they're waiting on, and it's coming down, and it's actually funny. Like, I think one of the big reasons why a lot of the side characters don't feel that important in this movie is that even Tyler, who arguably is the one who feels that he should, like, Kay eventually kind of does in hindsight because she gets more time after this, but Tyler, if anything, is the one that should feel like he's the most developed out of all the ones out of the main two. And he still just kind of dies here like a red shirt for the most part. I mean, don't get me wrong, he does jump in to sacrifice himself when a xenomorph tries to stab Rain with its tail, and he sort of jumps in and takes the bullet, as it were. Like, yeah, fine. Like, it's a big moment for him, I guess, but it doesn't feel like we've established their relationship enough, other than the fact that, oh, they were probably a thing at one time. But that never comes up, like, during the movie again. It never, like, comes up where they're like, oh, we feel something, or we've got unrequited love, or whatever. So it just feels a little bit like, oh, he's gone now. I guess he's just, that's him.
That's the kind of thing that strikes me as, like, there's probably a whole deleted subplot, like a few deleted scenes that would expand upon that a little.
I could, whether they shot them or not, or they cut them at the script stage. Either way,
like, this would be the payoff to all of that. He jumps in this way, noble sacrifice for the girl he loves, but it's not like they could move around that once they got to the editing stuff. Like, he still had to die that way.
Yep. Actually, no, did they go up in the elevator first, and she goes back down to get Andy first before he dies?
No, it's definitely the other way. Like, they open up all the elevator stuff, but they are it's only Kay and Rain left because Rain turns to Kay.
It's because I remembered someone being in the elevator when she makes that choice, and I was like, is it him? No, you're right, it's Kay. I forgot Kay was around now. Because Andy gets kicked down quite hard, and he, like, is sort of malfunctioning now.
Yeah, he goes back into his seizure stuff.
And it's worth mentioning this hallway also has that sort of laser thing from the...
So...
No, I've got a theory on this. I don't think this is complete nonsense, right?
Please.
I think the purpose of this laser has something to do with the eggs, right? There's a reason why it was on that ship in the original Alien, right? In that room with the eggs. So I'm thinking that this laser was here for the same purpose, whatever that is. Now, whether that's to, like, help gestate the eggs or possibly the opposite, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the question that I'm just coming across here is, I assumed in the original Alien that the laser came from the space jockey, that it was just part of the ship and it just looked cool and they just had it there. But this implies that it's something that comes with the aliens, that there's laser grid, this like laser that's just above the ground whenever
I'm not saying
conquer an area.
I'm not saying I'm saying the scientists put this laser thing here.
Okay, the scientists. All right.
So
maybe
I'm saying that. I mean, why they know the space jockey or the engineers had these laser things and used them. Yeah. Maybe they just figured it out and reverse engineered it. I don't know. But
if I'm being totally honest, it just feels like a callback. It doesn't feel like it has any relevance in the plot.
It is, but I tried to justify it with, like, okay, why is it here? What is it doing? Like, what's the purpose of it? They never talk about it or anything, but it's just there.
Right. Yeah. They have Andy just, like, crouch down and be like, huh, that's neat, but then they just move on.
But he's like sort of freaking out on the floor. So yeah, the two ladies go into the elevator. They just shut it in time. Xenomorphs don't get to them. They're going up this big elevator, which is very reminiscent of the elevator towards the end of Aliens. And halfway up the shaft, Rain says, "Damn it," because she sees on the screen. She can see like a video feed of like the hallway from the camera. And she sees Andy kind of like freaking out on the floor. And despite the fact that he's changed because of this chip in his neck, despite the fact that he let like Kay almost die before, she can't leave without him. She has to go back. And if I'm being honest, right? It's a bit of a reference, obviously, because it's very reminiscent of Ripley going back for Newt. But
Right.
if I'm being honest, that's not what bothered me about this, though. It was more just that this was the moment where I realized they hadn't nailed this, where this should feel like a bigger deal that she's going back for him, and I'm just not feeling it. Like, I'm not feeling the actual connection to these two. And I felt like they started off so strong. That first half hour did a good job of all the starting beats to their story. But by the time it got to here, I realized that they hadn't developed it enough for me to, like, care about this decision to go back and get him. I understood what they were doing from, like, a logical perspective, but I didn't feel it. And I think that was the moment where I knew the script was failing at its intention. And this was the moment where I felt that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I feel like it says more for Rain specifically than their relationship. I feel like I didn't know enough about Rain and like her own personal struggles and stuff like that to justify why she would go back here after everything that was said and done. She's kind of a bit too much of just the blank slate reluctant hero sort of going into this. Obviously, she does have her own, stuff with Wayland and stuff with all this other stuff. But ultimately, when it came down to her relationship with Andy, like, yes, I understand that she would want to come get him, but ultimately, because of everything that's happened over the past few, like, not even hours on this ship, like past 45 minutes on the ship, it doesn't feel like it's earned the point of going back to go get him. And that's not on their relationship. It's just, I don't feel like I understand her mindset well enough.
No, I think it's both. I think it is the relationship as well. Yeah, I don't think it's just her, but I think it's a failure to write some of this story that I think they're going for. I think some of it's just missing. But regardless, she goes back down the ladder. She lets Kay go up and says, hey, you get the ship ready, and if you're not up, just leave, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, that was the other thing that we skipped over. Because of Kay being in... She did get her neck slashed earlier on, so she's bleeding out heavily. They almost inject her with the black goo to say, hey, this will make you feel better enough that we can get you back down to the planet and you'll be okay.
Well, Andy theorizes that it might be good for her, but he doesn't know for sure.
He says, like, rats and humans share 25% of their genome. And I'm like, Andy, 25% is not a lot. That's actually a very small amount to be making these medical claims off of.
Plus, that rat didn't look so good.
No, it did not. But so Rain basically interrupts that, says, hey, I don't feel good about that. Let's get her down to the ship. We can put her in cryo, and that'll be enough to keep her safe.
But Rain gives her the vials, the little canister with all the vials. So she goes up with that, and Rain comes back down the ladder, and by now the aliens have scattered a little bit, so she goes up to... And this is one of these moments where I kind of felt like, okay, the aliens have all just left, and like she's having this like emotional like sit down with Andy, and she's taking out his chip. She has to convince him to let her. He's like, hey, you dying here is not good for the company, so you should let me fix your chip. So it opens, and she takes it out, and then he sort of returns to himself, effectively. So what's so funny is that a lot of the things that I don't like about this movie have now happened. Not all of them, but a lot of them have. And I was feeling kind of mixed by this point. However, I do think its best set piece is about to happen, which is they get they start running down the hallway. They get to the very end of it, and the aliens are coming down. We see them crawling all through the ceiling and walls and all that. And it's like, shit, like, what do we do? And she's got the pulse rifle with the auto aim there, and Andy's like, oh, we can't do that. And she's like, hey, and we never even mentioned this yet, but there was this running thing at the start where he tells a lot of bad dad jokes. Like, it's something that her dad programmed into him, is he just tells these really obvious dad jokes. And he's doing a bunch, and she's like, hey, tell me a bad dad joke. It's like, oh, we're going to die. Be you. Be the cute version of you. Tell me a dumb joke. And one of them, of course, is about gravity. I don't remember the joke.
I just finished reading a book on zero gravity. I couldn't put it down.
Yeah, very good. And that makes her think of the idea, which is, oh, when we came on the station, the gravity wasn't working. We can just turn it off, and therefore the acid won't just keep going down until it goes through the hull. So she turns off the gravity, sets up the fire. Andy's like sitting behind her. And what I think was really funny about this is that not so much the actual set piece that I think is more memorable about this part, but the first part where she's doing all the shooting, which is a fun little bit. But the bit that this feels like it's actually referencing is the turret section of Aliens that's in the extended cut.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because as she's firing the gun and she's like taking out all the xenomorphs with this rifle, Andy behind her is like saying how much percent of the ammo she has left. You know, he's like, oh, 80%, 60%. That's exactly what happens in that alien scene where the turret's going down and it's, you know, someone's reading the thing saying, oh, we're down to 20% on B, we're down to 35% on C. Like, and I was like, oh, this is kind of that scene from Aliens. It's kind of funny how, like, you know, there's things that remind me of Aliens, but then it sort of transitions into being more like Alien for a bit, and then it comes back to being Aliens again.
Well, that's why I think it's set where it's set. Like, ultimately, you could have positioned this wherever in the timeline you wanted to. You just say, oh, a stray xenomorph lived, and you put it wherever. But having it set here allows you to literally bridge between the two movies by having elements of both of them.
But you could do that after Aliens as well.
Yeah, you could have, but I think they specifically chose it during this period here to say, like, look, if you watch, if you're one of those weird ass fans who decides you want to watch stuff chronologically, like as they are supposed to be in universe rather than how it is released, then this going here, you're gonna get no like weird tonal shift that you would have if you put this like after Alien 3 or something like that. It's just going to feel exactly like Alien at parts and exactly like Aliens at others.
It'd be so weird to show this, like someone for the first time watch Alien, then this, then Aliens.
Right.
That'd be such a weird vibe. I would never do it.
Absolutely
horrible.
But
advice.
there are those people who are like, yeah, I watched the MCU in order, which means my first one's like freaking Captain Marvel or whatever.
Yeah, but that's fine if you've already seen them though, and it's like a
oh yeah
experimental thing you're doing just to see how it feels or whatever. But like showing someone that for the first time, that's weird.
No, you're right. One other thing I wanted to bring up is as they are doing this shooting thing, just before that, they tried getting into a room and Ian Holm is basically like, you guys don't have the vials anymore and the vials are on the way to the ship. So no, I'm not going to let you in.
This is where he says the line from Alien. And it's so weird because like you're saying he's a different version of the same model of android. That's fine and all that, just like David and Walter, but you've written him to be just Ash. Like, he's speaking exactly like Ash. He's dressed just like Ash. He's just Ash. Like,
I wonder if there was a version of this movie where they picked up the remains of Ash's body from the Nostromo and, like, repaired him so that way he also had all of this information. But then they were like, no, that doesn't really work. We're just going to make it another model, because why not?
Yeah. So... whatever, but anyway, so the bit after this is like, oh, we have to get back to the elevator, which is in the middle of this corridor. But now there's all this acid floating around in zero gravity. So, you know, and I think I did see some complaining online, people who know physics well are like, well, there'd still be trajectories from where the bullets fired, it'd still be traveling in certain directions. It wouldn't just be swirling perfectly like this. But who cares? Because it actually makes for a really fun scene where she has to try and float down the hall without touching the acid. It's good.
I was fully willing to accept, like, okay, maybe it's like, you know, there's still clearly ventilation going on, so maybe it's like air streams or just forming these sort of currents in the air. But yeah, no, I mean, physics wise, who cares at this point? You just had a bunch of aliens floating around and shot by a pulse rifle. Anything can happen.
Yeah, it's a fun sequence, like them going through, and there's a whole bit where she's floating and the acid's like in front of her, is like floating right in front of her, so she's going to hit it. And she's got like one last like couple of rounds in the gun left, so she uses that to like sort of like change her trajectory and like sort of like basically just like fire herself down to the ground, to avoid it. So it's a really fun little sequence. This is an example, much like the facehuggers with the temperature sensing. I'm like, okay, you're thinking of ways to use things we know about the aliens. In this case, particularly the acid, where they brought it up earlier. They've made it kind of a strict rule in this one. And then, like, oh, you'd already set up earlier on a way around it, which was the zero gravity. But then that's introduced this new problem, and it's kind of fun seeing them having to deal with this. Which is why it's so frustrating that I find some of this really bad in terms of, like, story choices, because it's got actually some cool ideas for, like, set pieces that in a movie that doesn't have all these other bad choices, I would really enjoy all these little things where, oh, maybe it's not saying anything, but hey, it's got some fun ideas with how to, like, use the alien, you know?
This didn't have to be burdened with the idea of it's continuing this massive IP and everyone wants it to be this fantastic thing. If this were just like a new thing coming out and they just set it in space with this other breed of aliens, this would be absolutely wonderful. I think it's only because we're coming into it and there's this expectation of, something more from it. Something, obviously, I'm not saying it would be wonderful in terms of, it's an A grade AAA movie or all that. No, it'd be a fun B grade movie still with the story choices. But I think it's because of what we're hoping from the Alien franchise that we have that little extra level of disappointment.
I'm going to disagree with that to an extent, because I don't think it's about hopes. I think it's about the choices they make are all based around nostalgia and fan service moments.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
right. If it's not an Alien movie, then they're not going to be doing all those moments. So it's like they're just sort of forced into taking the high ground, but it's not high ground if it's not a sequel. So I don't know. There's definitely that element to it. But anyway, they get back to the elevator, and there's zero G still like thingy, so they're just floating up to get out. But on their way up, of course, there's a whole thing here where the alien that was born in this movie shows up and appears, but not. So this is kind of a weird moment actually, where we know that when the zero gravity is on, or I should say that when the gravity's turned off, we know that it kind of like does these moments where it comes back on for like a minute and then goes back off again. That was established at the start. So they're on a bit of a timer and they're going up this shaft. And all I could think to myself is like, why aren't you like staying next to the ladder just so that, when the gravity comes on, like, because she's racing to try and get up to the top to where Andy is.
Andy gets off first because she got grabbed by the alien down at the bottom. And I think that she probably would have stayed near the ladder, but she basically just was pushing to get free. She didn't really have a choice when she got away.
I forgot she got grabbed at it's basically an alien just sticks its hand through the bars and like grabs her. But she gets away, and then she sort of loses the gun, which kind of gets, floats away from her. But I mean, she had like basically no ammo left anyway, so I'm not even sure why she's that upset. So she's floating up, but then the timer's like counting down to the gravity like turning back on, and it's like, wait a minute, you're like 100 feet from the floor at this point, because this is an elevator shaft. This is not very good. So yeah, like she almost gets to Andy, like her hand's reached out and he's going to like grab her because he's already holding out of the ladder near the top, and instead the gravity turns on and she falls, and I'm like, how's she getting out of this? I don't understand. Like I thought maybe she was going, because the gun had like got lodged and there's like a strap. I thought she was going to grab the strap of the gun or something on the way down.
Yeah, I thought either that or maybe like she'd be falling long enough for the anti-gravity to kick back in and then she could somehow find something to save herself. But that's, it seems like a death sentence.
Yeah. Instead, an alien catches her with its tail, and it turns out to be the alien that was born in this movie because you see the wound on its head. And I will admit, I did see some criticisms of this online, and while like I'm okay with the alien taking a second and kind of being like, oh, I'm enjoying the fact that I've, like about to kill you, like watch me grilling your face kind of thing. And that's almost like an Alien 3 moment. But in Alien 3, the alien didn't kill Ripley because Ripley was already pregnant with an alien. So the alien had a reason not to kill her. Here it's more just like it's enjoying the kill or whatever.
I was fully expecting that shot, the one with the extended mouth, and she's like cowering away from it. I didn't think they'd be able to help themselves.
It gets close. I mean, it gets close to it. I mean, that's the only thing that doesn't happen is the mouth coming out. But otherwise, it's the same thing. It's right in her face. But it goes on for a few seconds, and I you know what? If you want to critique this and say it's too long, and like I actually saw some people say they thought for a second that for some reason an alien turned good.
Like it printed on her,
Like why is the alien a good guy now? And that's not what's happening. It just, but for a second, it's like, wait, why didn't it just stab her as she was falling with its tail? Because it would do that any other time. So it's a fair critique, but it's there. But of course, she's about to get killed. So Andy comes diving.
Well, not yet. So the first thing that happens is there's a bunch of aliens coming up through the corridor beneath anyway. And because the gravity kicked on, the elevator, which was above them, starts falling down. Andy's holding it up this whole time until eventually he's like, well, there's a bunch of aliens coming out. Maybe we can make this work. Which,
for the record, this is established in the movie, but he does have like super android strength. So he's like holding this big heavy elevator car up.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just plows down the elevator shaft. She manages to squeeze into the corner where the ladder is. And it just crushes all these aliens beneath it. Except the one that caught her managed to like also hide in the corner.
Yeah, basically,
so it managed to escape unscathed.
Just did the same thing she did, just to hide on the other side to not get hit. And it goes to kill her, and this is where Andy comes flying down, and he grabs the gun on the way down that was lodged in the side.
Yep.
And it lands on top of the alien, shoots it in the head, and I think he says, "Get away from her." And then he fires the gun and looks over at her, and then looks back down, fires the gun again, and says, "Bitch." And Joe, what's so funny is that even before the tacked on extra bit of when he says bitch, I already groaned. When he said, "Get away from her," I groaned. And I thought, oh, what are you doing? That was so, like, I can see a world where you didn't make any other references and you really sold me on this relationship. And, you know, the whole movie, it's like, oh, he's turned into like an evil android and this is him coming. And again, this might have meant something else if he hadn't just like had the evil chip taken out of him. See, if he'd like overcome his programming to save her here, it might have actually been like a big moment. It might have been like, oh, he overcame, he like fought the programming and did the right thing despite the fact that he wasn't supposed to. That would have been like a big character moment and felt quite happy and whatever. The line would have still been a bit forced, but it might have like landed better because I cared about what he was doing. Instead, it just kind of feels like a sort of so-so moment, and then he says the line and it's like,
See, my theater, like, I wasn't groaning mainly because for all of this, whenever they did a callback that even I recognized, my immediate thoughts were, is Pete gonna love this or hate it? And almost always it was hate it. But in my theater, as soon as that line got said, there were like laughs and claps behind me. Like, people enjoyed that. So
yeah, but I don't know if you want laughs. That's like, it's so forced because there's like no reason for him to. I mean, they do set up that someone else, like the dickhead character, calls him a bitch earlier, so that's why he knows that word. But that's not much. Like, see if you're going to bring up a phrase again for a reference, right? The best example I can give you is Rise of the Planet of the Apes with the "Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape," right? Because it's so perfect because it sets something up that circumvents, it flips what the original movie did, and it's a really fun play, and it makes enough sense and context that you kind of get away with it. But this line is just such a big moment from Aliens that, like, he could, I don't know, say anything. He could say anything but this. It felt so forced. And this comes after, like, you know, Rook or Ash, whatever you want to call him. This comes after some of these other direct moments that they've recreated and remade from the previous movies. So when this line hits, and this is meant to be an emotional, like, hurrah in the movie where he's like proving his loyalty to his sister, his best friend, and he's going to protect her no matter what. It's like, oh, you just used this moment to make a giant reference to Aliens, and it feels... This is the moment where I started to feel sad because I'm like, this movie has nothing... I mean, it has some cool ideas, but ultimately it only lives to say, remember how good Alien and Aliens were? And that's the moment where I started to feel sad. That's
like what I was kind of getting at before. All this stuff that we were leading up to from the beginning, pretty much up until they took out like the cryo power cell thing and the facehugger started coming out. I liked all that because it was the movie being its own thing. Like, yes, it's in the Alien universe, but it is doing its own creative things. It's setting up its own stuff, and it feels like maybe it doesn't have anything to say yet, but it at least feels like it's doing something wholly individual and creative on its own right. After that point, the references come fast and heavy, and it is really hard to differentiate. I mean, even though I was laughing at the point where the black goo showed up, I recognized that that was the point of the movie of, oh, this only exists to be like Disney saying, look, yeah, we get it. We understand everything that was going on when we acquired this property. It's not its own thing.
Yeah, and honestly, the CG in a dead actor or a young actor is very much a Disney thing. Like, they've been doing that in Star Wars, done it in Marvel. Like, it's very much a them thing at this point. And I'm not saying no one else has done it, but I definitely can't help but think of that when Ian Holmes shows up, kinda. Yeah, so
the first thing that popped in my mind was Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One.
Yep, and I saw someone on Twitter call this movie, I think one of the critics who put out their review kind of as the embargo was breaking, I can't remember who it was, but they said this movie is the taxidermy of a franchise, and like, I actually kind of get that phrase having watched it.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, as much as I like it when the movie does its own thing, I was a little bit in when it came to all these references or whatnot, but at least it was still having fun with it. It was still doing things that, were decent set pieces, more or less. I was having an okay time with it. When the movie gets back to doing its own thing, that's where I started having major problems.
Well, it makes some choices in its third act, which we're about to get to. So yeah, obviously they get up to the ship. They're going to dart away. It's a whole thing. And like when the ship's like leaving the station, because the station's like hitting the rings of the planet as this is happening, and this is all pretty beautiful stuff.
Absolutely out of time.
Yeah, this is all pretty beautiful. It looks great. Like all this stuff, I can't fault it really. But they're able to fly the ship away, and as there's a sweet moment. It comes around here somewhere where Rain says to Andy, I want to change your prime directive, and he's like, yeah. It's like, your prime directive is now to do what's best for us, not for me, but for us. Because Andy's like, the whole thing early on in the movie is like, we find out there's a revelation that he's not allowed to go to this new planet because it's a human-only planet, because I mean, I'm not saying they're exactly this, but in the context of this movie versus like all the Weyland-Yutani controlled stuff, they're effectively like space Amish or something, where they're all like, no, we're just human beings here, we're all natural, whatever. But like, she's like, no, it's what's best for us, and she's like, no, you're coming with me to this. I don't care what the rules are. I'm not like, we're going to go. And to be fair, at this point, because like most of the people have died, the fuel cells for all the cryopods now would probably be enough for the two people who are left, because it's just her and Kay are the only humans that need to go to sleep in the cryopod.
Yeah, that was the part that kind of bothered, because they show her loading Kay into the thing, and she's like, look, like Kay at this point we skipped over, she injected herself with the black goo. She was in a lot of pain, she did that, but we didn't see anything happen to her yet. I
think there might also be an implication that she did it because it's not so like, she was obviously scared for herself, but I think the idea is that she's scared for the baby. Like if she doesn't make it, the baby's going to die. So I think that was like the extra motivator to do that and like take the risk.
Yeah. So then Kay gets on the ship. Ian Holm pops up saying, "Hey, all your friends are dead. Ignore anything that points to the obvious. I need you to press the big old button on the ship that says remote control, so I can I can take you off and get you off the ship." And she doesn't, for whatever reason. She just lets it sit, and then eventually, obviously, Rain and Andy show up and they put her into cryo sleep. They turn to Ian Holm over the comms as he's trying to do the remote control, and as soon they let him do the remote control enough to get them off the ship as it's crashing down. But then as soon as he's like, well, now I will get you down back to the planet and you can get that stuff to a Weyland-Yutani official, and she disables the remote control again, and she's like, actually, we've got other plans.
Yeah, and you also see Ian Holm like sort of like die on the as the station's crashing into the rings, you see him sliding across the table and going into destruction. So
I do like one of his last things he says before it happens is like he's yelling at them and saying like, you have no idea how insignificant you are in this whole thing. Like he recognizes like the company is all the company is life, and it's going to keep on doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, so Rain packs away Andy into like not the cryopods, but into like the chair or whatever it is that he'll
just straps him down, puts him hooked up to the computer so that if anything happens while they're in cryo sleep, he can get up and fix it.
He doesn't need to be in cryo sleep though, obviously, because he's an android. But obviously there was 5 pods. They all had enough for 3 years. That means that there's enough for 2 pods for maybe 8 years. So that's most of the journey.
Yeah, should be fine.
Yeah. So it's like, okay. But just as she's getting ready to go in, and it's a sort of thing where, okay, I know we're going to have one more kind of like stretch where they're in danger, right? Because it's an alien movie. Yeah. But obviously, if she's ready to go into the cryopod, that means she's in the skimpy white tank top. And I'm like, yes, she's dressed like Ripley from the end of Alien, because of course she is. We have to do that. So I'm like, all right, we're doing that again, fine. And of course, as she's about to go in, the pod that Kay is in starts to like vibrate or something. Like there's a struggle inside.
Yeah, it's malfunctioning.
And she's like, oh, what's going on in there? And she pulls it out. And then we get a scene where Kay doesn't have a chest burster, right? Different from that. She gives birth to a pod, is the best I can describe it. A pod comes out of her vagina.
It's like a miniaturized football-sized alien egg.
Yes. But there's like little bits like acid sort of leaking out of it or whatever. So like immediately Rain like tries to like take it away and deal with it a bit. She watches it melt through the floor. That's it, because it's leaking the acid.
Yeah,
but
she holds it with a shirt. She tries to get it down a hallway to like throw it out the airlock, and then she doesn't make it the whole way through.
But you can see just before it melts through the floor that in the opening of this little egg, there's like a very human looking face, and I'm like, okay, what are we doing here, movie? Where are we going with this?
I completely lost the plot at this point. I was like, you could do anything now. Like, I have no idea.
What is it with these alien sequels try to like reinvent the wheel in the last act? Because I swear they really, and to be fair, Fede Álvarez kind of did this at the end of his Evil Dead movie, and I thought it worked wonderfully, where he introduced this whole new element to the lore at the very end, and it was kind of interesting and all that. But I'm like, you know, also, okay, so the black goo on a pregnant woman has made her give birth to something else, right? Something monstrous.
Yep.
I'm like, you know, Alien Resurrection kind of ended with like a human-alien hybrid thing. Like that was a thing. It looked very different than this, of course, but we did do that, and it's the worst part of that movie. So, of course, when we get this whole scene where I'm going to call it the newborn, because that's what the thing was called in Alien Resurrection.
It's credited in this as offspring, but yeah, call it what you will.
The newborn. So yeah, so the big car, because this thing they're in of it, this little ship is like a cargo ship. So it's this big sort of like just container with all the ore or whatever it is they've got.
I mean, it seems empty, but it would hold the ore.
Yeah, but there's a whole thing here where, of course, she's locked a door for this thing not to get to her, but she has to sneak into the spacesuit while she's in her underwear and tank top. Right, all quietly, just like an Alien with Ripley, because obviously things are going to start to depressurize and whatnot. So
the full series of events, if I remember correctly, is she, like the egg, the pod, whatever you want to call it, drops down into the cargo hold. She goes down to check it out, and
it's empty now.
It's empty. She can't find what it was. Meanwhile, upstairs, the offspring, in the matter of minutes, has grown into a fully formed like adult form with the face of an engineer and the tail of a xenomorph. It's kind of like it's hard to describe. I mean, it's got a face of an engineer, it's got a tail of a xenomorph, and then the limbs are very skinny. It's kind of a sort of half alien, half human type body. But there was a little moment with Kay where she, like after it was born, she looked down at her breast and sort of like touched herself and like pulled her hand out, and it had like all this goo, like alien goo. And I think the implication is, because next time, you know, when Rain's like in her spacesuit and she comes back and she finds, well, I think she's in the space, maybe she's not in the spacesuit yet, but not yet.
She comes back and finds this thing, the newborn, and I think the implication is that it's breastfeeding off of Kay with this goo, because he's kind of hunched over her, and I was like, oh, is that what that is? Was that this thing's like?
I could see food? That would make sense. It's horrifying and it's disgusting, but
but I mean, I'll give you this. This thing at least looked creepy when it smiled, because it did smile at one point, and I thought, okay, that's actually quite a creepy visual. Now, admittedly, engineer alien hybrid, like if you told me this was what this movie was going to end with, and this is the point where like, I was trying to stay positive the whole movie, and I definitely felt like we hit a low with the get away from her bitch line, but when I saw this thing, I'm like, okay, I actually think, like, because like I don't always think this way, but there was definitely a moment, like sort of like a little bit after like the Ash stuff or the Rook stuff was introduced, where I'm like, okay, I didn't like that, so this is definitely not great, but I still think this might still be a 7 by the end. I still might think, like, I'm going to enjoy a lot of this, and it's going to be a good time, a good ride. I'm going to still like it more than any of the sequels after Aliens. But by the time we get to this thing, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, I still won't call it a train wreck, because it still looks so great, and the production value is great. All that stuff is fantastic. And I do think Andy on his own is somewhat compelling. I think David Jonsson gives a good performance, but like when I got to this, I'm like, oh, like this, we're in disappointing range now. We're in, like, I'm sad now.
we want to talk about the hubris of Weyland-Yutani. I want to talk about the hubris of every single Alien movie. And it's every one. If you go back and think about it, every one except for, I think, AVP1 has had some new alien every time. The first one introduces Xenomorph. Second one, the Queen. Third one, the little dog version. Fourth one, the human-alien hybrid. AVP2 introduced the Predalien. Prometheus ended with that weird little spike-headed version.
Technically, it was the first AVP that introduced the Predalien.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so then AVP2 got out unscathed.
Which is also the worst one in the entire franchise.
Yeah. Prometheus had the little spiky-headed one at the very, very end of that, and then Covenant also had...
To be fair, Prometheus had almost everything in that movie was new.
True. I'm just saying every single time we have to introduce this new type of alien, this new crossbreed, or this new thing where, oh, it's becoming more human or whatever, or, oh, it's becoming an engineer. Wherever we're at, it just always disappoints after the Alien Queen.
Yeah, the Alien Queen was a perfect addition. It fit in with the themes of motherhood and kind of like took that to its zenith, and then that's it. We don't need to introduce any new alien stuff, really, for the most part. And I think that really was obvious to me in this, because that first half hour I really liked, and it just kind of tells me that obviously I always want the alien to be around in some form, right? That's part of the fun. But it feels like the actual fleshing out really should be the world. It should be Weyland-Yutani. It should be the society on Earth. It should be, these different type of situations that the company puts people in that then results in them being at danger of an alien or something. Like, there's other things to explore here. Like, you don't have to keep adding new variations of xenomorphs, because honestly, it just, H.R. Giger and Stan Winston, to an extent with the Queen, created, lightning in a ball. Absolutely. And this idea of, we can come in and do something else. Again, I don't necessarily mind the idea that if a facehugger attaches itself to something that isn't a human, you get a slightly different version of a xenomorph. That's fine. That's kind of always been established.
That makes sense.
And that's okay. But, there's definitely a point at the end of this where I'm like, okay, I'm just...
Because that's the thing for me, is that it feels like it keeps on looking for some smaller and smaller niche cases of what hasn't been explored. So obviously, the Alien in Alien 3, it didn't attach to a human, so it looks differently. Okay, I can accept that. I don't like the end result, and I don't think it's, big enough to be its own thing, but fine, I can accept your stuff. Fast forward all the way when we get Prometheus and stuff like that, the idea of this spore gets introduced into a guy, that guy has sex with his wife, and that wife ends up giving birth to this giant trilobite looking thing that then attaches to an engineer, which then makes the alien. It's what? What are you doing? Why are we going down this wildly circuitous path just to get ourselves a new breed?
And remember, that wasn't even an actual xenomorph. That was a pointy-headed thing.
Right. Exactly.
So,
but it's that same sort of thing here. Okay, sure, if a facehugger attaches itself to a pregnant woman, we can't justify that that's going to be anything different. But if the black spores go into a pregnant woman, well, we haven't covered that one yet, so let's go with it.
I feel like filmmakers, for some reason, are just endlessly determined to always have new breeds of alien, and I feel like that's not really the interesting part. Is
no.
Having new breeds,
It's what you do with them. I really appreciate the fact that they discovered in this aliens, to an extent, are able to be stopped with the cold. Because that's not something we've dealt with before, and it allows for all this sort of temperature play of okay, they don't like being frozen, and they can they can't be killed, but they can be stopped.
As soon as the temperature scanner thing was introduced, temperature was a recurring motif throughout the whole movie. So I had you thinking about the gravity was another thing. Okay, even though we've had all these movies pretty much in space, this is the first time they've actually used the idea of the gravity being turned off as a way to deal with the aliens in some form. All that's interesting stuff, which is why it's so frustrating that a lot of the stuff story-wise and character-wise by the end misses the mark for me, is that there is ideas in here that I do like. It's so frustrating. Ultimately, she does what they always do. She just jettisons it into space. She opens the big container and lets it get sucked out.
Andy got killed. He was attacked by it, and it's dead. She drops the cargo ship, and
he's kind of dead. He's heavily wounded, but it's implied that he's going to be fine when. she fixes
For
them.
some reason, she puts him into cryo sleep and says, like, that'll keep you okay until I can fix you. I'm like, bro, that's a robot. Like, what's cryo sleep gonna do?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's dead. I would say he's just heavily injured.
Yeah, that's fine. And then they do a double fake out here where they do the whole moment of dropping the cargo hull while she's strapped to like the main ship, so that way she's able to like survive it. But then the alien also survives it. Not the alien, the offspring also survives it, and we do like a jump scare moment as she's rappelling back up to the ship. But then she ends up kicking it off into the rings of the planet, and it dies anyway. So,
yep. And then, if you just didn't have quite enough callbacks to the old movie, despite the fact that nothing about this character said she's going to do an audio log at the end where she says she's the last survivor of whatever the name of this ship was.
Hold on, I have it. I have the Corbellin.
Yeah. So, yeah, they just end it exactly like Alien. And then as soon as her speech is done, it fades to black, and then you get a big jump of the title coming on the screen.
Yep.
And that's it.
She is going to that planet that she wanted to go to. Like, she is heading back there. So.
Yeah. You've got, like, the broadest theme that I think they were trying to go for is this idea of pairs of people and it not being about, you know, like, unlike Romulus and Renaux? Remus. Unlike them, like, they don't betray each other. In the end, they are united, they are loyal, and they are, you know, tied together, right? Like, that is the only, like, sort of thing I can feel like they're really going for by the end, sadly. And I don't think they nailed it for me, because I just didn't really feel the connection to the characters. They just needed a bit more fleshing out, needed a couple other drafts, perhaps, to really nail that side of things. I think the actual fighting of the aliens, for the most part, fine. It was the lore dumps, it was the fan servicey references were just coming. Like, I expected some of that, but it was laid on so thick that it's in the ballpark. It's not, I don't know if it's quite as bad as like Ghostbusters Afterlife or whatever, but it's definitely in the conversation. Like, we're definitely talking about all of this being kind of up to that kind of standard.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I still think, despite everything I said there, I still had fun in the moments up to the third act. I think the third act for me was just such a slog. When I say third act, I mean like post them getting back onto the ship. All of the hybrid offspring stuff was just a complete whiff for me, but I had enough fun.
It's so funny. You sound like me talking about Resurrection.
Yeah, nah. Because it borrows so heavily from that for discernibly no reason. Like, how did they just not think back to, oh yeah, human alien hybrid? That worked so well the first time.
Yeah, but now they're doing this thing where, like, yeah, clearly humans are from engineers because this thing looks like an engineer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are we really doing that? Like, can we just never bring them up again, please? That'd be lovely.
I mean, I think we are at the point where they can't. Like, I don't see any way that if they continue to make alien movies that we are going to get more. I think they lock down pretty much everything unless we cover the span between Covenant to Alien. That's the only time I think is left where they could say, oh, look, there's still black goo left, and we're putting the name Prometheus to it.
I almost wonder if the only reason why they even tied it into it at all and brought it up is purely because Ridley Scott was still producing this.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm thinking.
That's the only reason. It's like, hey, Fede, I'll let you direct an alien movie, but you've got to, like, still admit that Prometheus is relevant.
And I also, again, I'm wondering how much they are trying to say with Ridley Scott, like, Aliens is not canon, because it's, as much as they dodged around it as best they could, the fact of the matter is a queen would have made so much more sense at any point in this than all this printing face huggers and whatever else is going on. So I wonder how much of that was intentional.
I see why you're saying this, and maybe Ridley Scott does feel that way, but ultimately he can't just do that. And there's nothing in this movie that actually says Aliens isn't canon. In fact, it definitely can't say that because it's set 30 odd years before then. And unless they encounter the ship, the safety ship, the Ripley's sleeping in, and blow it up, Aliens is still going to happen. There's nothing they can do about it.
They specifically say, the Colonial Marines, disbanded all those years ago and never to reform.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm disappointed. I mean, that's all it really comes down to. I'm disappointed.
No, I get that. I get that.
It's like there's bits of it I really like. I want to like it more than I do. I'll definitely end up watching it again to see if like, you know, now that I know what it is and I can kind of accept it for its faults, is it going to work better for me now that I can just enjoy it for the, you know, the movie that it is, you know, even if that's never going to be like what I was hoping it could be or whatever. And I realized that, you know, they are in kind of a rough place in the sense that like I'm going to be super critical because I do love that this is the aesthetic I want. But right. I am going to critique when they're just rehashing things, but I also think that some of their new ideas, like this hybrid at the end, is stupid. So, like, yeah, there's a fine line to walk, and it takes a lot of, like, restraint in some ways, and I just think that them trying to evoke moments from the original two movies is its own undoing. Like, it makes itself feel unimportant, because this is not its own movie. It's just a love letter to other movies, and therefore it's never, you know, it never justifies its own existence as like being a something with a movie, you know, with a message or a meaning, or this is its own piece of art. It's purely supplemental fan fiction to the real movies, which are the first two. So, yeah.
I mean, I agree wholesale with what you're saying. I think for me though, like I just come down a little less harsh on it, in that I'm not as connected. Like, yes, do I think Aliens are great movies? Obviously, I think they are very well-made films, but ultimately it's not a franchise that I have this deeper attachment to, that I was just waiting and praying until Alien Romulus came out that it was good. I mean, I would have liked to see a good movie, but ultimately what I was looking for is something that manages to straddle that line of the horror element that was introduced in Alien and the action elements that are more present in Aliens. And I think this movie more or less accomplished that. It just didn't make me care about the characters, like any themes or anything that was going on. And then that third act just trashed it. So ultimately, I would say this is closer to a turn your brain off sort of movie, rather than the kind of in-depth character development that the franchise was known for prior.
I would love to enjoy it on those terms, but the egregious fan service just takes me out of it. Like, that's too much as it goes. Yeah. And this is not just because it's Alien. Like, see my thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife, see my thoughts on Jurassic Park Dominion, see my thoughts on, you know, Terminator Dark Fate to an extent, like Halloween 2018. This is a running thing. This is not a new opinion on this one. This is like the same problem all these movies have to some extent. They all do it a little bit differently, but ultimately comes down to the same thing. So, David, what was your favorite scene of the movie?
God, what was my favorite scene in the movie? I've definitely locked down my MVP. I'd say favorite scene for me. I mean, I don't want to say it's like at the very beginning, because I feel like there was more interesting stuff by the time we hit the middle, but ultimately it was the promise of that opening on the planet stuff. I really, really liked them setting everything up of the Weyland-Yutani, like she's stuck on this planet and there's like no way off, this hopelessness to it. Everything pretty much up until they got to the space station, I'd say collectively is just like a favorite scene, because it's the promise of what I really wanted from this, if it were to do the deeper sort of analytics of
it's
what
like,
this universe could be.
It's like 10 scenes, not, but yeah. I see what you're saying.
If I had to nail it down to one, that like was the most promise of what I was hoping to get out of this movie, it's the scene where she goes up to the counter and says, like, I've completed my quota, I'm ready to go. And ignoring the little bit of exposition that goes on there, just the part where the woman behind the counter clicks a keystroke and immediately she's doomed to die on this planet, essentially. I think that was a really great idea as to how you get into the mindset of this hopelessness that Weyland-Yutani builds, and I would have liked to see it explored a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, I like that stuff. Actually, it reminded me, though, the first time we see our two main characters, they're having like lunch or whatever before they go to that place, and you see the woodpecker thing sitting in the shelf like next to the table from Alien, and I thought, oh, that's a bit egregious. And then when Andy sits down, she says, "Oh, you're going to have that cornbread?" And it's such a weird thing, but cornbread was specifically mentioned in the dining scene at the start of Aliens, where they talk about not liking the cornbread. And all I could think was, okay, I mean, these aren't like super like intrusive, but like that's already 2 references I've noticed in this like first proper scene. So I was a little worried because of that. But I mean, I agree though. Like, the first half hour was like, okay, I like the premise. I like the broad strokes of what they're setting up and seeing this slice of life at this whaling colony that's really functional. Although I am tempted to still go with the floating through the acid just because it was a cool set piece, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with that. But it's, you know, it's like, do I like the potential of the story that then later I'm disappointed didn't get fulfilled, or am I going with the set piece? I'll go with the set piece because it doesn't have the disappointment attached to it.
That's entirely fine. If I had to give my little honorable mention though, specifically just because of how I come into this movie, it's the moment I see they enter the lab and the black goo is in the middle, because I cannot express the joy on my face at that moment. It was I was in childlike wonder at the pain that I could feel from Scotland like 2 days later.
I became the Joker in that scene, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I was ready to start yelling about living in the society. All right, MVP of the movie.
It's got to be Andy.
Yeah,
I mean,
Andy,
I can't even dick around that. That's by far.
As much as I wish the payoff to him and Rain's relationship worked better and it was better established, and I do think he should have like fought through the programming without it just being taken out. That felt like a kind of a, I don't know, a cop out almost to me to make it easy.
Yeah.
He's still the MVP. He's still the most interesting character. He's got the most going on. He's the most sympathetic. So yeah, absolutely him.
Yep.
So yeah, there you go. All right. Well, that brings us to the final question. And of course, David still gets his homework, so it's a long episode. But David,
yes,
what are you rating Alien Romulus?
Oh boy, looking back on my ratings for this series, I'm not going to change it, but I am going to say that I think I may have put Resurrection and 3 a little bit high.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not going to say I put Covenant too high because you would not let me live that down, but it's a weird area. It's a weird area.
Did. You overshot that like I don't know, like the urinal was there and you pissed all over the wall.
Regardless, I know how I feel about this movie in regards to the other Alien movies. It is a different beast altogether from things like Prometheus and Alien Covenant, because it is trying to be an alien movie first, rather than what I felt like those movies were trying to be, Ridley Scott doing his own thing first and an alien movie second. So ratings wise, I don't feel like I can really compare to those. So strictly looking at like the main 4 from the series, I think that this is better than Alien 3 or Resurrection. But I put Resurrection at a 7, which I'm not sure this really gets the 7 mark because of that entire last sequence. I think if you can't nail the entire final sequence, and I don't even mean nailing and like getting it perfect, I mean nailing it as in like anything half decent, then it's going to detract significantly, because that's the last thing you're leaving me on. So I'm not sure I could really say it's a 7, but overall I enjoyed it more than Resurrection. So I think what I'm probably going to end up doing is saying that the movie up until the last like bit probably deserves a 7.5, but because of that last bit, I'm going to drop it down a full point and just give it a 6.5. I don't think it quite hits into that 7 territory because of it, but everything else I was more or less enjoying.
Yeah, I am conflicted over this rating because I think there's too much bad stuff for me to say it's good, so therefore it's definitely not a 7.
That's fair.
Because that's the line where I say good. So I'm thinking 6. But do I hate the hybrid at the end and all the fan service stuff and the legit complaints I have with the characters not being too compelling? Or is how great it looks and feels in terms of being in the alien world, it being grungy, set design, practical effects, some good set pieces and ideas, does that get it up to the 6? And I'm kind of hoping it does in future viewings. I'm hoping that when I see this again sometime down the line, knowing what it's going to be, that I can kind of just enjoy it as a 6 out of 10. Like, I want to be able to enjoy it as a likable 6 out of 10. That's the best I can really hope for now. I think right now, though, the way I feel, I gotta go 5.5.
Okay.
Which is not much of a difference, admittedly. I do think it gets over the line because of the technical qualities, because it does look like a movie. When some movies these days don't look like movies anymore because they're just like all shot on green screen and just feel very low effort. This absolutely feels like it's directed by someone trying to make a film, and that's good. And I appreciate that we've had a nice handful of these. I appreciate that it's seemingly doing all right. It's got the second highest box office for an Alien movie for its opening weekend at 40-something million. Had an $80 million budget. That's cool. Like, I want more medium level budget movies like this, and the fact that Prey did well, and Prey was a better movie, right? You know, if we're comparing like the Disney owned Fox like comebacks of these franchises, Prey wins. Prey is the better movie, but you know, hopefully at the very least this can lead to something else, maybe a better movie, maybe all the nostalgia's out of our system now, so we don't have to do it next time. That's the hope at this point. I know Fede Álvarez said, hey, if this movie does well, I'd love to do an AVP movie. Hey, maybe we'll get an AVP movie that's half decent. Who knows?
Oh, we can dream.
We can dream, but yeah.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
And this is just wild speculation here, but let's run with an alternate universe where this didn't get the theater treatment, because originally this was slated for just a Hulu release.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's give it half the budget. Let's say 40 million. Do you think that if the story stayed generally the same, you would have appreciated it more if it were just a straight to Hulu with like less put into it?
No, I'd dislike it more.
You dislike it more?
It would lose whatever like it has. That said, though, I don't know if the budget changed because it switched to theater. I think the budget was already set. I don't know if it was a case
probably.
Because Prey did just go straight to streaming, and people wanted that to be in theaters.
Right.
So. Yeah, but it does show that Fede Álvarez is good at making these movies look good with a reasonable budget, and that's positive, and I'm hopeful of him making more good movies in the future. But sadly, out of the 3 movies he's directed now, this is my least favorite, and that's a shame. I was hoping it would be topping At Least Don't Breathe, but sadly, here we are. Yeah. So
that's fair.
Oh well. All right. So just to get David T's homework quickly. If you enjoyed the show, if you like things, if you want to support everything we make and want more podcasts, you can support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube memberships if that's more your thing. But you can get access to bonus shows every month like Criterion Cut and Extra Reels, where we review either some of the best movies of all time or some of the worst movies of all time, depending on what show you're referring to there. So you can get all that. Madam Web was the recent Extra Reels, which also guest starred Tim, and that was a hoot, and also a long episode because that movie is batshit bad. So, fun times. But David always wraps up with a homework movie where he goes back and checks out a movie from the show before he joined to catch up. What was your homework movie this week, David?
Well, I was actually going to be... I split it depending on whether or not I thought this movie was terribad or at least okay. And so my homework for if it was terribad, which I don't think it was, would have been Predators. I was going to go in order because I know you said Predator and Predator 2 were required, and I thought, well, that's the next one in the list. I haven't heard good things from you about it, so I was just going to get 2 bad things out of the way. But because I thought this one was slightly better, I decided to switch over, and I am watching them out of order now, and I did Prey.
Okay.
So we got both the Disney-owned Fox properties coming back. I decided going into that would be fine because it is a prequel. It's up before everything. It's totally easy to do. That being said, I fully understand why you told me to watch Predator 2
first
before watching Prey.
That's it. I am going to just pull you up on something there. I wouldn't call this a prequel.
This isn't a prequel?
No. It's set before in the timeline, but I don't think that instantly just makes something a prequel.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Right? You want to differentiate on the terminology, correct.
I just mean in the sense that, to me, a prequel would be like, oh, we're following the young Dutch as he like rises up through the ranks or whatever. Like, if we're going to get a bunch of different Predator movies where it's just a Predator in a different time period and different location, it's like, is one a prequel to Prey because it happens to be in a time period that's further back? Not really. They're just all, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was using prequel just in the general term of it takes place before other events.
Yeah, but... no, but it almost doesn't. I know there's a couple of little wink nods like references to the other movie, but it doesn't matter. You can watch this on its own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I'm just using it more so in the sake of, I'm pretty sure that the first Predator did not take place in the 1600s, but I could be wrong on that.
I'm saying it's not these. It doesn't have the spirit of a prequel. That's all I'm saying, right?
That's
so.
Fair.
I would not use that word for Prey.
No, I'll give you that. No, but I very much enjoyed Prey. I thought it was a very interesting take on this stuff. It was I think I like it more because of how low tech not only our protagonists are, but also you find out the Predator by the end is. Like, this is set hundreds of years before, and you can feel like, no, they made some tech advancements on their side as well. Not, obviously, they're still light years ahead of us, but...
I mean, they have space travel, so yeah.
Yeah, but you can still see that there were some changes between the 300 years of the two movies there. Beyond that, no, I like the lead. I think she was a very strong lead there. They did a great job with her of showing how capable she is, and obviously her struggles of living in her own society and people thinking that she's weak for whatever reason. I think only...
Because she's a woman. It was sexism, David.
Obviously, yeah. But no, I think my only little thing that I was... I get what they were doing, but ultimately it felt weird, is that at a certain point they introduce a secondary antagonist group, and it just feels like such a strange turn out of nowhere to me that it kind of is like jolted me for a moment. But the movie ultimately recovers, and I think it does a great job of wrapping it up with an interesting...
That said, though, there's a lot of good scenes of that group trying to fight the Predator, which is very funny, to be honest.
Yes.
So I would not give them up for nothing.
No. Like I said, it works it in fine. It just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. No, Prey's great. Prey's like, oh, hey, we can just have a good Predator movie. You don't have to make it complicated. And you will appreciate that now when you go to watch Predators and the Predator.
Yeah, can't wait. So yeah, no, I think for that I am just gonna give that one. I'll give it a straight 8. I think it was a great film, and I would easily come back to it and suggest it for anyone who likes original Predator.
Yeah. But there you go. That's the show. I'm wrapping up quickly because this is 2 hours and 45 minutes, and we have size limits to think about. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and Mother Ad Salsa.